Going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here at Steen78904. If you want to get all technical, it is 10:30 on the dot on the East Coast, 7:30 West Coast, 8:30 Mountain Time, 9:30 Tennessee time. So, of course, it's time for the flagship show here at Rotogrinders. It is called Grinderslive. Joining me today, usual suspects, not messing around. Week 11 double digits. Grant Neiffer. What's going on, Grant? How are we took nothing pre-show as far as this slate. I like to keep it organic when we go on the show. Our pre-show conversation was kind of vile, actually, but we'll leave that behind the paywall, I suppose. Grant, how are things in your world? What are your thoughts as far as this, this slate where there's some incomplete information, right? We don't really know what's going on with Lamar Jackson. He's been sick in and out throughout this week, and it's a 1:00 game, so we'll know actives and inactives, and that may shape the slate to some extent, more so like on DK, I think, than other spots potentially. But we don't know about Kyler. We're assuming Kyler's not going to play later on today. Once again, Grant, give me your general thoughts as far as week 11. What are we looking at?
We're going 100% Tyrod Taylor, right?
No, that's too many.
We ain't. No, it's definitely interesting. Like, I've just been sitting here, like, I don't know if Lamar's going to play, and then there's the whole Kyler news later on. It's pretty much a coin flip, so it makes it a little tough between site to site. I mean, I'm maxing out Super Draft in Yahoo. Super Draft's super easy. I'm just going very heavy on Kyler, or not on Kyler, on Colt, just hoping that he ends up playing. And if he does, I'm great. If he doesn't, then, I can always swap over to Dak, to Mahomes, to Joe, to Derek Carr.
We never say Joe. I know you mean Joe Burrow, but like we always use first names like Dak and Lamar. Nobody says Joe, but I know who you mean. Yeah, just Joe.
Just Joe. So like it's a little simpler on Super Draft because you can just mass swap to someone. But yeah, on Yahoo, I've kind of just like, I'll need to wait a little bit to put my lineups in based on Lamar news. But yeah, I mean, it makes it a little easier just kind of play Wilson on that side and just bring it back with some wide receivers. Hope that Kyler maybe does it. It doesn't really matter if he plays or not for my builds over on Yahoo. But yeah, it's an interesting slate. And I mean, my biggest anger issue right now is how much chalk I'm eating at running back, because like the top guys are the guys I want to play. Like that like there's enough of them right now where we don't normally have a situation where we have 3-4 guys that are getting a full-on brunt of the workload and are under 6.5K. So there's about 6 running backs that account for like 80% of my running back exposure.
Jeff Wilson's one of them.
Jeff Wilson, AJ Dillon, Mark Ingram, James Conner, David Montgomery, Myles Gaskin.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this: if you are playing the dude for Arizona, which that's currently not in my plans, Colt McCoy, especially like you mentioned Yahoo. I think the cap you have enough to work with. It's not as tight as it is on DK, and of course, DK specific. I think that's where it's most interesting as far as Lamar because Tyler Huntley is 4.1K, and the cap is pretty tight over there. And like I've just heard this dude yesterday. I'm not going to pretend like I know who he is, but I was digging into him and looks like he's got some legs. He ran a bit in college, dual threat. He's got an arm as well too. Obviously, he's got two of them. But yeah, he's kind of sort of someone interesting at 4.1K. And then let's bring in Andre. Andre, former $1 million winner. You could sort of tack on what we talk about there by all means, your general thoughts, but the other thing is that we kind of haven't talked about yet is it's an 12 game slate, but there's one game that clearly stands out above all the rest. Team total, players that are appealing, Dak versus Mahomes. We don't say Patrick. We say his last name. We say Dak's first name. I don't know why we do that. 56 total, Andre. It's not sleeping on anybody. Ownership's going to be about.
You don't know why they do that?
Yeah, why don't
because generic first names you generally use the last name because there's a lot of Joes.
You just said Joe though.
I did because I'm cool. I can say that. You're not.
Oh, fair enough. But
yeah, just like where you generally don't see another person with that name, Dak, Bam, like those guys, Lamar. You generally go with the first name. Especially when it's a fairly common last name like Lamar Jackson. Jackson could be 20 different people. So you kind of stick with what's not really known with other people.
You know what Dak's real first name is?
I did at one point.
His middle name's Dakota, but his first name is Rain, which that's a cool name too.
Oh, Rain?
R-A-Y-N-E.
Why do we call him Rain?
I don't know. I'm not really sure why he goes by. It's his call. Fun fact for you, Andre. What are your thoughts as far, whatever, by all means, we'll talk, position by position in a second. But I feel like we have to, in the overview, talk about Kansas City and Dallas. And are you taking a stand in that game or you're kind of going to get with the field or what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Obviously we know that's the game that's going to be the most popular on the slate and for good reason. We know why. You got, seemed like Patrick Mahomes is getting right a little bit right now. And Dak is, he bounced back from that terrible game he had before against Denver in a big way. So I'm probably going to be under on that game. This is another game I like to target a lot of. Going back to my guy who's pretty much my favorite quarterback all year. And hopefully he, brings it home for me since he owes me a lot of money for not picking him when he went off the 1 week in Joseph Burrow. So I'm going to be over on Joe Burrow in that game for sure. But there's a couple other quarterbacks that I like today, a decent amount of. But like you said, the way to get different, the way it's going to make you get different, it's going to be hard or determine a differentiation a lot. I think it's going to be like the running back position. All the strong cannot hit. I mean, they're cheap enough. They're cheap. I understand that, but all of it can't not hit. So like what's going to fail, what isn't going to fail. I think that's what we have to try to navigate and figure out how to manage that and see what we like a lot and then go from there. Because that's just my opinion on it and then go from there, picking the right receivers from there.
All the running back chalk hit last week, which is I took a stand and not embrace all of it. And that was kind of a bummer for your boy, but oh man. I mean, look, these kind of things happen. I feel like it was better last week than it is this week, and we'll dig into it, obviously. By the way, Grant, you did mention Yahoo, their $1 million baller contest. They're paying out $1 million. They're collecting $800,000. Therefore, there's a negative 25% management fee, rake, whatever you want to call it. Currently, less than 75% of the spots have been claimed. $20 to get in there. And it's a flat payout, $100,000 up top out of $1 million prize pool. And again, they're adding $200,000 to the prize pool, not raking it at all. And we do want to mention here, of course, that use the promo code GRINDERS25, GRINDERS25 for a free $25 bonus on your first deposit. They also have single game contest. They have single entry contest too. Single game contest Monday night, Thursday night, Sunday night. And they are still doing their Yahoo Cup, which is a $150,000 in prizes in total, season-long deal.
I'm
There's a
winning
live
$1
final
on that right now. No big deal. Sorry, I'm the
Where you at?
greatest. Winning $1.
Oh yeah, I've been joining
$2 and went up.
I'm probably winning about $1 or $2. I haven't looked to be honest, but yeah,
in 11,267th place out of 206,988.
I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. I needed that. I need your approval.
There's also a much smaller season-long contest going on, the OGs. I don't know if you've been entering that one over there on FanDuel with Beer Makers Fan, Head Chopper, Notorious, FanDuel.com/OGs show. Just $500 people, single entry contest, just like any other contest over there. But there is a season-long element where they're giving away, I believe it's either $5,000 or $10,000 in additional prizes. All right, let's talk about, by the way, I do want to mention weather. There's a little bit of weather lurking. I wanted to put it in the chat. 3 games are currently orange, according to Chief Meteorologist Kevin Roth, who just had a baby. So his wife did. Congratulations to the Roth family. Shout out to them. I'm going to go ahead and drop this link in chat for the people. Orange in Tennessee and Buffalo and Cleveland, various degrees of some wind and some rain. Some are starting out fine and getting worse progressively. Go ahead and read that at your own leisure. And of course, closer to get the lock. What do you have, Andre?
So real quick, just some update on Lamar Jackson that I just seen on Twitter. Saying that he arrived to the stadium, but he sounds really not like himself. They're trying to keep him hydrated so he can play. They say that this virus really hit him hard that he currently has. So it's not, I don't know. I guess he's going to try to play, but it's not looking too good for him.
Yeah, I see the Rappaport tweet now too. Tyler Snoop Huntley is the backup, apparently. All right. And yeah, he's interesting to me on DK, and we'll talk about it. I don't know. I mean, he's like 6K on FanDuel. I think he's like $20 on Yahoo. And I guess that's kind of sort of so interesting. But the cap for me is just much, much tighter on DK. DK, where, I'm considering Tua in some lineups. I'm considering Carr in some lineups. Just kind of make stuff work. You talk about Joe Burrow, if you can't spend all the way up on a guy like Dak or on a guy like Mahomes. Open it up, Andre, as far as quarterbacks. Who are you looking at? Who's popping for you? And again, depending on where you're shopping, the ownership's going to reflect it. And we have our ownership right now, and everything's in flux depending on news. So understand that. But right now, Mahomes is grabbing the most on DK at 11.6%, then Burrow at 10.3%, Carr 9.9%. It's pretty flat. Allen at 9.8%. Nobody's really jumping off the board. Where do you stand? Who are some of your favorites?
Joe Burrow's definitely like my number one favorite guy to go with right now. Just because from the standpoint of this from the past 4 weeks, like from when looking at all the data that I've been looking at all week, like the Vegas, the Raiders have been are number one and giving up fantasy points to quarterbacks, the quarterback position, and number 8 at the running back position, and 2 at second at the tight end position too. So to me, that's a good sign for Joe Burrow to pretty much go out there and have a good game. The wide receiver position, I know that the corners are probably decent, but Jamar Chase is, I think, on a different level. So is T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, who I think people are sleeping on still, who came up with probably having one of his worst games of his career, can bounce back in the spot and have a good game, I think. So Joe Burrow to me looks like a great pick. Even going with Derek Carr on the other side too as well. I love this attacking this game as a whole. Honestly, Derek Carr, getting him with Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, as your run backs, I think it's a great thing to do this week. They're not going to be that owned too as much as I think they're going to come in less owned than what we think that they are as of right now. Just because of the news, unless we get for sure news that like for instance, if Lamar Jackson doesn't play, or Kyler Murray does it, which I honestly don't think Kyler Murray does play today, honestly. But I think that those 2 plays are pretty much my top plays I'm looking at. I love going to Dak because he's a little bit cheaper on the other side, but also because Kansas City's defense is really not that great. I mean, they're turning around, I think, a little bit, but they're still not an elite defense in my opinion. So going with him and everyone's going to be targeting him with CeeDee Lamb. I'm going to go a different route and go with Gallup, be over the field on Gallup, and then go with also Dalton Schultz at the tight end position, snagging with a little bit different. I don't even mind sprinkling a little bit of Wilson in there as well in some tournaments, just because he's not going to be on anyone's radar probably as much as the main 2 guys, the main 2 receivers will be. Oh, and also for the Derek Carr point, Deshaun, what's it? Deshaun Stevenson, I believe is the receiver name. Oh my gosh, I can't think of this guy's name. But the receiver that they just picked up for the Raiders.
Djax. Yeah, Stevenson played basketball with the Jazz and the Clippers.
Jackson, yeah, Deshaun Jackson. Sorry, goodness
No worries.
gracious. But Deshaun Jackson, he's a good tournament player, I think, this week as well. We want to take a couple flyers on him because I think I know the A-Dot has been down since they lost Henry Ruggs, but I think they're going to try to take a couple deep shots here, and he's a good option. I know he dropped the pass last week.
He did not drop a pass. He threw the ball after he caught it at the other guy.
I don't understand that.
And he could have ran for a touchdown, but he decided against that. That was too easy. That was a weird play.
I don't want to do that.
He forgot how to football for a few seconds. It's okay.
He said, "Let's make this more interesting of a game." so those are like the top guys I like. Of course, obviously tournaments. I love getting to Jimmy G a little bit, Tua as well. Ryan Tannehill, I think, is going to be someone I think that's going a lot lesser on than he should be, because I think they're going to focus more on the passing game compared to the running game, especially without Derrick Henry there. So playing him along with AJ Brown is a top target of mine to get to in tournaments as well.
That was one of the weather games. Just kind of note, I dropped the link in chat for the people. What up, chat? Hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notifications, all that good stuff. Stay here for the next 2 hours and 15 minutes, taking you guys straight up to lock, getting you prepared for week 11. Tennessee, the game might start dry, but doesn't stay dry. We'll see rain for the majority of the game, making it a more difficult, but not impossible, to efficiently move the ball through the air. Buffalo, another one that should start dry, but won't finish that way. Rain is increasingly likely the later we go. Let's see, potentially 20-mile-per-hour sustained winds later on in the game, but for the most part, 10 to 15. That's not a big deal. For me, at least. Detroit at Cleveland, where they're just going to run the ball anyway. Both these guys don't want to pass the ball. It's going to be 1930s football or something like that. What are we expecting here? So rain at the start of the game, tapering off at the end. So it starts a little bit of rain, kind of phases out. Grant, all those quarterbacks, I'm still confused. Why do you want to play Colt McCoy? Like, why is he even in your pool?
Super draft.
Okay, so is he like a 2X guy, I assume?
Like 1.8.
So, okay.
Yeah. That was strictly super draft, but also like saying that on both DraftKings and Yahoo, it's going to be too tough to kind of swap stuff around if Kyler doesn't end up playing, if I end up playing Kyler. So yeah, it's strictly super draft. Like on DraftKings, like I'm very high on just a few guys. Derek Carr being the biggest one. Like I love Derek Carr today. He's put up big numbers. He's going up against Cincinnati. There's a big team total there. It's projected to be close. This screams shootout. We know who he's throwing the ball to. Like this is a perfect spot for Derek Carr. Another guy.
Huntley. Do you have a Huntley take if Lamar doesn't play?
Oh, like going super heavy on super draft at 2X.
Okay. Oh, 2X. That's play him over McCoy. You give him 2 instead of 1.8. He's probably a better player straight up. No, I don't know.
I mean, yes, but I can compare McCoy with both, like bringing it back with Lockett or DK, but I compare him with Kirk, like all the guys that are high X multipliers, whereas Baltimore becomes a little bit tougher because not a ton of them have a huge multiplier. So it's most likely going to be pairing with Andrews, considering Andrews takes up the tight end spot instead of a wide receiver or flex spot.
Yeah.
But yeah, other guys, Jalen Hurts is super interesting, even though he's going up against New Orleans. Like, I know they're a good defense, but looking at his current projected ownership, just seems too low. Aaron Rodgers going up against Minnesota, who's been involved in a lot of close games, a lot of big games, like just been all over the place pretty much all season long. Rodgers offers a decent amount of upside. Russell Wilson going up against Arizona. I know that if Kyler plays, it will be better.
Are you concerned how terrible he was last week coming back with the finger?
No, I have what's called short-term memory loss.
But I mean, look, I understand variance in small samples, but like, what if he's actually just playing hurt?
What if he's not?
Well, yes, that is. They said he was rehabbing like 21 hours a day or something like that. I don't know the number. They dropped a lot out there. 19 hours, maybe 21 hours. I don't know.
I don't know if you know this, but there's pretty giant variance in offenses that throw the ball deep at a huge rate. So it's a lot timing. He hasn't played for a while, and he didn't get much practice, if I remember correctly. So when you rely that much on chemistry with your wide receivers, when you're throwing the ball deep, it's kind of a big deal. It's why OBJ throws to OBJ on Monday night were not good. Like chemistry.
My counter to that, by the way, not to cut you off, my counter is that, you know, Pete Carroll loves playing his 1930s football. He loves to run the ball. And if it's Colt McCoy and not Kyler, is Colt McCoy really going to push that Seattle offense to really pass the ball 25, 30 times? Or 25 times not enough, but like 30 plus times.
I don't know if you know this, but in every game, in every team, in every situation, there is the possibility of it not going the way you want it to go. I don't know if you're aware of this in football.
Yeah, but are you pretending that Kyler Murray and his offense with Arizona is the same exact offense that Colt McCoy would run?
No, but it doesn't matter. Every single week of every single season for the last several years, Russell Wilson has offered you some of the biggest upside on the slate.
Okay. I mean, I just don't. Russ to me is a better play if Kyler Murray's playing. Is all I'm saying.
Yes, I agree with that.
So why are you fighting me on that? why you're starting an argument about it?
I prefaced at the beginning by saying I'd rather have Kyler playing if I'm playing Russ.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, the main thing is you just know that you can pair him with either DK or Lockett, and if Russ has a big game, it's almost guaranteed that one of them is the top, if not one of the top plays on the entire slate.
Who do you prefer?
Lockett. I mean, let me double check. I checked ownership earlier. Let me see if it's updated at all. Lockett's coming in at 11. Metcalf's coming in 10. All right. So, yeah, I'm going with Metcalf then. He's a little bit more expensive, strictly just because, like, our current ownership kind of points towards Lockett and then him being the same. But with Metcalf being $800 more, I think more people will go with Lockett. But I'm probably going 50% on him.
All right. We should move on to talk running backs in a second. Andre, your final thoughts as far as quarterbacks, and it is worth noting, like DK, like just it's a little bit tighter cap, so you know it's going to be harder to squeeze in the big boys. But on Fanduel, you can do it fairly easily, and that's generally what you're supposed to do. Just pay up for one of the big dogs, and the same deal with Yahoo as well. The ownership reflects that. But can't name everybody. If we didn't name your favorite quarterback, ask about him in chat. We'll do our best to elaborate on that later on in the show. Andre, final thoughts as far as QBs?
You can play Cam Newton today too. I'm gonna have a little bit of him, but it's just kind of be cautious.
Is he gonna play that much in this
I don't.
game?
That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Be cautious because I don't know how much PJ Walker is gonna be. Is gonna play today. That's a concern of mine. I'm gonna have a little bit unless I get some word before lock that Cam Newton is playing like only like 40% or 50% of the plays, that I won't pretty much have him at all at that point. Some people are even thinking of, like from what I've heard around the industry this past week, people are even looking at Joe Flacco. Do you want to take a shot at him? By all means,
that's a no for me.
I don't think it's worth the risk personally.
Yeah, I would play Huntley way before I'm playing Flacco. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can't do that. It's just, and like, yeah, the Cam thing is so weird because earlier in the week, I'm like, oh, Cam's going to be chalk 5.1K versus Washington. And then it came out that his coach, there's some kind of report that I guess he doesn't know the whole playbook, which is understandable. It just came in that, this is a new system in Carolina. So he's probably not going to play. I mean, who knows? It's, beat writers and there's gamesmanship and all that, but I suspect he probably won't play the entire game. But what does that even mean? Is he missed 3 plays? Who cares? And the Lamar thing, what if Lamar plays? There is a risk to him just like saying, you know what?
Yeah, I'm staying away from it. I'm not playing Lamar today. I'm not playing Kyler at all today. I'm just staying away from him. It doesn't make sense. The reports even for Kyler that they expect Colt McCoy to start. So I'd rather just not deal with those situations at all. And every time, and I also look, this is the 3rd time Lamar Jackson's not felt well this year, too, besides COVID. Every time after that he's went on to play, he has not played a good game. So to me, at that point, it just doesn't make sense to roster.
Yeah, it's so weird because like ownership, he's probably like everybody's gonna have the same thought. It's a good thought, but he's like 1% owned. But yeah, and there's also a chance he plays the first series and doesn't feel well. And it's like, you know what, I try to give it a go, and it's just not happening.
We've seen him go to the bathroom during a game before.
Yeah, allegedly. All right, let's talk about some running backs. And Grant, it's Ingram. They brought back Jones for what it's worth, but Ingram should still be a pretty solid play. The price got bumped up a little bit. I think the best one is probably San Francisco. The situation there with no Mitchell against Jacksonville. In theory, Sermon is better, or people love Sermon, but allegedly the coach hates him. Of course, we've seen Juszczyk run the ball there in San Fran a little bit. We've seen the receiver, Deebo Samuel, run the ball a little bit. James Conner still Arizona's backfield, but he got bumped up. I love McCaffrey's price on DK. I think he's worth spending up for on FanDuel and Yahoo as well. We have Chubb coming back from COVID, and like, who knows how he feels? Are they just going to thrust him right back in? Because that looks like a game where he can absolutely smash. You pair him with that Cleveland defense. And I don't know how many people are going to play Chubb. And then there's Gaskin. They brought up Duke Johnson, who's back in our lives. Will he play much? I don't know, but he's been downright horrific, Gaskin. But the matchup against the Jets, supposed to be a bounce back. Grant, I threw a bunch of running backs your way, and I know you touched on them earlier, but feel free to, elaborate on the names I threw at you. And Dylan, I think Dylan is the best, safest. I hate using that word, but feels like the best running back play when you consider opportunity and price.
Yeah, I mean, obviously depends on which site you're on, but over on DraftKings, like, I love most of the chalk. I think my favorite is actually Gaskin. Like, New York has just been shellacked by running backs, and I do not use that word often. He's just in a great spot going up against the Jets. He's gotten a lot of volume over the last few weeks. It just hasn't actually panned out too well. I mean, 14, 20, and 12 carries for 31, 34, and 36 yards. It's not going to continue like that. They were like, Buffalo was a tough matchup. Baltimore is not an easy matchup for a running back. Houston just didn't end up working out well. And I think they were up enough where they knew that the run was coming. So this is a spot where I think that Gaskins, being the lowest owned of those guys, is probably one of the better plays. But
Duke Johnson, you don't care about? They call it Duke. You don't think it's inconsequential?
I mean, it doesn't help, but I mean, there's a reason he was on the practice squad, not on the active roster, even when Malcolm Brown went down.
Yeah.
Like, he probably eats in more to Gaskin's role than he does other guys like Ahmed, but I don't care. Like, it's probably going to get more people off him. So I'm happy to take that little bit of risk. The interesting lower owned plays are Michael Carter. Like, we don't know if Joe Flacco is going to check down as much, but very easily could. Dalvin Cook coming in at sub 10%, going up against Green Bay. Like, they're going to run it no matter what the matchup is. But he can also get stuff done in the receiving game. It's supposed to be close. Like, Dalvin Cook's a potential smash play every single week. But the super interesting one is Zeke at 7.7K.
I agree.
Sub 7%. I cannot for the life of me figure out why he's less than 10% owned in like the game of the week, one of the games of the year, like one of the highest totals we've seen all season long.
It's because there's a lot of cheap running backs. That's why. And like,
yes.
Yeah. And then you want the prime receivers. You want Adams and you want Tariq. Like, that's the reason. But you're right. And let me just throw one in your way, because the other side, we have CEH supposedly coming back. I mean, they have CEH, they have McKinnon, they have Gore, and Darrell Williams has been coming off his best game of the year, I'd say. He got the bonus on DK receiving wise. He's really cheap on Yahoo. He's really cheap on DK. I don't know what to do with him. And I think, how do you predict like the usage and how much he's actually going to get in that game? Because it's, I don't know. I don't believe.
I mean, there's a wide variance of usage for both CEH and Darrell Williams. Like, it could be anything. Like, there is a scenario where Williams gets nothing. And my problem is that he's priced right around like Jeff Wilson, James Conner, and Mark Ingram, and AJ Dillon, and David Montgomery, and Myles Gaskin, and Michael Carter. Like, the chances of him outscoring all those are pretty darn slim. So because of that, I'm just not going to use him at all. Like, I think I have him X'd out of my player pool. I start off the day thinking like, maybe I should play him, and just slowly dwindle down my ownership in him to zero. Like, I don't have any interest in that entire situation. Yes, it's leverage off of everyone stacking that game, and I'm actually going pretty far underweight on that game outside of probably Zeke, but it's just a spot where you can't really trust him, and you have other viable pivots where the chances of Williams or CH landing in the optimal are so slim that you just can't really take a shot.
Man, I don't know what to do with Gaskin either, because he's been so horrific. But like you said, this is the get right spot. If you sort by fantasy points to straight yield the running backs, defense versus position, the Jets are the absolute worst team against running backs this
not
season.
Even remotely close.
It's not even close. They give up 35.38 FanDuel points per game to just running backs. 35, right? The second worst team, your Seattle Seahawks, 27. like
Yeah, they've
27,
actually been
26,
better
25.
over the last few weeks.
Yeah, well, the Seattle, you're talking about the Jets.
Seattle Jets are going to jet.
Yeah. It's pretty wild how that's going down. But I don't know what to do. But like you're probably supposed to play Gaskin, but he's been horrific too. And in the last 4 weeks,
Gaskin's my highest owned running back. Gaskin's my highest owned player.
Last 4 weeks, Grant, if you just 4 weeks, the Jets giving up 43 fantasy points to running backs as a per game. Like that's a collective, not just one, but all the running backs. 43.
Yeah. So the idea of fading Gaskin is a good idea if he weren't sub 15%. You fade him if he's high on, but you got chance of him outscoring AJ Dillon, Wilson, Ingram, Connor, all of them is actually pretty decent if he's just an average running back versus the Jets. And Miami has a 24 implied team total. Like if you're not playing Gaskin, you should probably be playing Tua and Waddle.
Yeah. It's a rough offense to get attached to, but like you said, the matchup is really, really good. That Jets defense was bad and it's gotten worse. Got to bring Andre in here. A lot of names thrown out there. Who do you want to attach yourself to? Is there anything you want to take a stand on? Any of you be significantly over, significantly under as far as the running backs that were thrown out there? And feel free to throw out some new ones.
Well, the Gaskin take, I love Gaskin today. It's right now my second highest exposed running back on the slate. Maybe might go to number one. I have to just see him moving around a couple of things now. Another guy that I'm looking at, actually that I want to just get a little bit more verbiage from the coach is Jeff Wilson. I want to play him and I want to be over the field on him. I think he's a good play today. It's just a matter of what they're gonna do with Trey Sermon. You can't also trust Shanahan over there. He'll sit there and do something different at different times. So I know we also have gotten the other guy there. What's his name? Jaceki, I believe. Oh no, not Jaceki. Oh my goodness, why am I blanking today? Of all
For San Francisco, Kyle Juszczyk.
Kyle Juszczyk, yes, sorry.
Yeah, he's annoying too.
He's gotten some running. He's gotten some rushing attempts earlier in the season too. So he might break into some along with Trey Sermon. So that's something we have to watch out for, I think, today as well. Dalvin Cook, I love being over the field on him. That's the only thing we should look at. I like even Nick Chubb too, getting over the field of him. Two plays though from the same game that I talked about earlier that no one is playing a lot of because they're gonna be attacking the passing game, which you can still play the running backs in, is Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon. They like if you look at what we have right now, just like from a standpoint of what they're giving up on the season, both teams, over the past overall in the season, the Bengals are giving up the 5th most fantasy points overall in the season. In the past 4 weeks, they're giving up the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs. And then when you go on the Raiders side, 9th overall in the season and 8th in the past 4 weeks. So to me, just from looking at those stats right there, along with them coming off a bye week and now how much we know they love to get the ball to Joe Mixon, to me, he's a play that he's my favorite play out of the two. I will try to get as much exposure to him as I possibly can. Josh Jacobs, he's going to get the work. You just have to worry about whether he's going to have a couple other backs that are there eating to his workload. But he can always break one and go long. And even if he gets 15 touches and about 5 targets this game, that's still enough where he can get to value and above that. And his price point that he's at right now, being only $6K, is below, I think, what he actually was worth and playing at as far as a level last year. So I love getting to those two guys definitely in tournaments. A lot of AJ Dillon obviously is fine. Mark Ingram is a great pick. It's a great guy to have exposure to as well. And obviously Christian McCaffrey, I think he's going to come in a little bit under-owned the way he should. His rapport with Cam Newton has not changed. They played with each other before, so I love getting to him as well.
Does anybody find Deontay Foreman interesting for Tennessee? Revenge game.
I want to play him a lot, but then I don't want to play him at all. I don't know. Like I think they're going to really more focus on the passing game. So I'm thinking about playing more so on the passing attack with Ryan Tannehill versus Foreman.
Grant, you have a take on Foreman? I'm kind of on the fence. It's also one of those games that potentially can have some weather as well too, and they should be ahead. And he's like looked better than Peterson. Not that that's hard to do. Peterson looks like a guy just came back and hasn't played football in a
He
while.
looks
Which
like
is
a 40-year-old dude.
Yeah, well, he's not 40, but yeah, I mean, he's not
like
just
36.
he's still ripped, I'm sure, but yeah, he looks better than Peterson. They might just want to grind with him, who knows? But Nichols obviously not going to be playing. I think Foreman's interesting. He's in the mix for me. He's warmed up to me as the week has progressed.
I mean, depending on the site, I'll have some of him over on Yahoo and Super Draft, but not playing him over on DraftKings. Not that I'm against it. I'm just not doing it.
Ingram or Wilson? Who do you prefer, Grant?
Wilson.
Yeah, I do as well. Andre, you feel the same? Ingram versus Wilson?
I don't know. I personally want to say Ingram, because I don't know what the usage is going to be for Wilson, even with Kyle Shanahan. I don't trust Shanahan. That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Does Tony Jones come back, become a thing possibly? That's your team, right? Is he going to get much run, Jones, for New Orleans?
I don't know how much run he's going to get. I know Mark Ingram knows the playbook and he knows it well, so I trust him getting more of the work, and obviously gonna if Tony Jones does eat into it, it'll probably be like maybe 20%, if that, or maybe to just spell him out a little bit here and there, unless they have a specific packages for him. But other than that, I think Mark Ingram is the guy. They brought him there. They brought him there for a reason, clearly. So especially now with Kamara out, I think they're going to try to use as much as they possibly can.
Let's see. Tony Jones has not played since week 4, 13% of the snaps then. Ingram, 85% of the snaps last week. Alex Arma, 18% of the snaps last week as well. Just interesting how that's going to go down. All right, we got to move on, talk some receivers. Got to save some time for the questions to the chat as well. Andrea, you can only play one, Davante Adams or Tyreek. What do you prefer?
Davante Adams.
Follow-up question, and I saw this question in chat from Michael, and it's something I've thought about, and a lot of people I'm sure have. You can even do this like in a large field, right? Dylan, I think, is going to be one of the most popular running backs this week, if not the most popular running back this week. Can you play Dylan and Davante on the same lineup? Are you comfortable doing that?
You can, yes. Am I comfortable with it fully? I mean, unless you think Aaron Rodgers is going to go out there and throw like 2 touchdowns to him and then have a 4. I'm definitely going to play the quarterback with that match. I'll play Rodgers with that stack too. Then, if that's the case. That's the only way I feel comfortable doing it, and then have a run back as well. So I'll probably play like Cooks will be my run back with that.
Grant, same 2 questions. Davante versus Tyreek, and can you play Davante on the same lineup as Dylan?
Davante and yes.
Yeah, it's so close. All right, feel free to elaborate those 2 receivers and then kind of branch out from there.
I mean, like, we have some cheap guys or some moderately cheap guys in Higgins and Gallup that are going to draw a huge amount of ownership, rightfully so. Just target share, game environment, everything makes sense. Like, the spend ups are looking pretty good. I don't know if I might go well underweight on Debo. Like, I know he's been getting huge volume and it's a great matchup, but like Kittle's there, it could change some things around. I don't know, like it's tough to go too far off the board in terms of wide receiver. Like, all the guys that are giving you a huge amount of upside are going to be owned because that's where running backs are. Like, so the only real thing you can do is go a little bit different at wide receiver and pay up at running back. And you're looking for guys that you have to pay down on. I mean, all I'm really finding that are going to be largely overlooked is Brandon Ayuk, which I'm not happy about doing that. Like, and Cedric Wilson, yeah, he can put up a decent game, but like, they have weapons. They have plenty of weapons. There's no guarantee. They don't have to throw to Wilson. The really interesting one, and a guy that I didn't really talk about much during quarterbacks, is Chicago. Like, why can't Chicago put up a decent outing? Fields has been drastically better recently. A-Rob is no longer there now, but he was a big part of it because they weren't throwing the ball much. Like, they were throwing the ball 20 times a game for the majority of Fields' season. Now they're throwing the ball more. They are letting him run the ball more. Like, Mooney could be in for a huge game here. Fields is looking a whole lot better in this offense, even with Nagy being just the worst. He gives you some upside. They use him a little bit in the running game. Like, with Lamar out, it definitely takes it down a little bit, but
Not officially out, but that's our presumption.
Yeah, it's just so weird. Like it's so tough to dissect things without knowing about that.
I understand. I just want to make sure in case somebody misheard you or whatever. I know what you're saying, but go ahead.
Yeah, and then I keep wanting to play Rondale more.
You like that? You like that 1A dot?
I mean, doesn't matter if he gets there on volume and can break off a lot of things and get some rushes. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to get weird on this slate, and it's just tough. And
by the way, Wilson played 1% of snaps last week. I think one snap, but like obviously the presumption here is that Cooper out, he's going to step in. He gets a little more shuffled his way, and Schultz as well too at the tight end position. And by the way, I don't know if you mentioned or kind of glossed over, like Michael Gallup, the price on Gallup, he's going to be super chalky. He's a cash game du jour play, especially on DK. Renfro is another guy that has, pretty good volume, pretty good price, in a positive matchup as well. And I just want to think it's interesting, we didn't talk about Jonathan Taylor at all. We didn't really talk about Josh Allen, like Diggs, like that game are kind of ignoring.
I like Taylor, but Josh Allen's tough to play with that weather.
Well, I mean, it's Buffalo. He's used to it, and we're not really sure how severe it's going to be. And I think
he's used to it, but he's also performed drastically better or drastically worse over the course of his career in bad weather.
Did the total drop in that game? That's usually one of the signs that I look at. But you should be on top of this.
It's still at 49.5.
Okay, I mean, team total at 28 or so.
Yeah, rain's not as concerning as wind, but
yeah. Which is, they say potentially 20 sustained, 10 to 15, which I don't think that's terribly alarming. Do you?
I mean, it definitely hurts ceiling because obviously deep passes are gonna still be like it can still do some damage to deep passes.
Andre, jump in here. And also, I want an AJ Brown take. He got, I was going to say skunked last week. He wasn't good last week. Wasn't skunked necessarily. Seems like a good bounce back spot. Again, another spot where there's some potential weather. I'm not necessarily trying to be frightened of it, just being aware of it. Andre, add on to any of the guys that have been thrown out there, and who else you want to throw in the pool?
Sorry, I just was looking at this real quick with the Dallas situation you were talking about with Wilson. We also possibly played Tony Pollard to a running back. Because I remember one of those weeks, I want to say it was week 2. I want to say one of those receivers, I think that was the first week Gallup was out, and they used Pollard out wide a lot like that week, if I'm correct, in a slot position, if I'm correct. So he might be interesting in tournaments as a receiving option too, because he was on the field a lot of the times, even with Zeke there too as well. So he's someone you might want to look at too as well. Back to wide receivers. Pretty much I like getting to AJ Brown. He's coming in at as you mentioned before. He's just a good play against Houston. We know Houston's is pretty much ranked right now second as far as in the past 4 weeks as far as giving fantasy points to the wide receiver. I think he's going to come a little bit lesser owned than what we have him at right now. And I think that AJ Brown could be in for a monster game today. I don't think anyone should be able to stop him. To me, he's a fantastic player, probably if not one of the top players overall on the slate, next to Devontae Adams, who we talked about before, who's going to pretty much get the targets peppered from Aaron Rodgers, who should be able to put up a fantastic score in this game from his last 2 games, where he's pretty much had only 10 and 14 fantasy points, but that's because he also hasn't scored a touchdown too. So hopefully he'll get into the red zone in this game against the Vikings. I like getting the Dallas receivers are obviously okay when it comes to CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. I probably would prefer to get to Gallup is going to come in higher own because it's cheaper. But probably did maybe try to pivot a little bit to CeeDee Lamb just for ownership purposes, or mix the combination. Like I said, you either add if you want to add Pollard to it as well, or you go with Dalton Schultz from the tight end position when we get there as well. I like getting to the Cincinnati receivers as well. Jamar Chase obviously is my favorite. T. Higgins is someone that everyone's pretty much valuing a lot of, but no one's talking about Tyler Boyd. I know he had a bad game. The last time he played, he only had 2 targets and only caught 1 pass, only had 2 fantasy points, but he throws to all 3 of these receivers, and this depends on the matchup. So I think Tyler Boyd is still a great player. I think he should still be on higher than what he is as compared to the other ones as well. Another guy that Grant actually mentioned was Mooney. I like getting to Mooney today a lot. He is someone I think that was here's why sneaky play. I hope he's still sneaky. Even though we got my 4% on, I want to be like double, maybe triple the field on him. Like you said, Justin Fields has been playing a lot better lately, and that's his main guy that he tries to target a lot down the field. So I love getting to that spot as well. And in Arizona, Christian Kirk, I think even with seem like him and Colt McCoy have a rapport. So I love getting to him. It's pretty much like a lot of these mid-range receivers. Also, I think are good to target. They don't have obviously the same upside as Devontae Adams, where they can put up 50. But if these mid-range receivers, some of them that I listed off, can get you about 20 to 25, I think you'll still be in good shape as long as Devontae doesn't get like 50 or any of the other chalky receivers get like 50. I think we still got the Seattle receivers coming a little bit under what they should be. I like getting to them as well today too. And another sneaky play is Terry McLaurin. I think you have to just play this guy every single week because you never know. He can always get behind the defense and catch a deep ball and take it to the house. So those are pretty much my main plays for today. DJ Moore, if Cam Newton is back, I think you should target him a lot too as well. I would say Robbie Anderson too, even though, but I want to see.
I'm playing some Robbie Anderson, and I hate myself for it.
If Cam Newton is playing today and playing a majority of the snaps, I will have probably DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson for sure.
Grant, we got to move, but quick question for you before we talk about some tight ends. Knock out some questions from chat. We step aside for Beer Makers video, then we bring in Ben and Erik, and they give you a whole deep dive conversation as far as looking at the slate from a GPP perspective, and then Crunch Time follows them. Rashad Bateman steps in as the Baltimore #1 receiver, but no Hollywood Brown, but also we're probably not going to have Lamar. What do we do with him, if anything?
Play him.
You still like him? You're still fine with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then tight end, play the jock, looking at RG ownership, outside of Everett, like top 8, 9 tight ends are. Well, I'm probably not playing much.
Well, tell me this: Waller, Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews. Your favorite of those 4?
Kittle. But my favorite tight end on the entire slate is Colt Mccoy.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you because you're talking about the Bears and you're talking about losing Allen Robinson and Kmet, especially on DK. He kind of works there where the cap is tighter. I don't mind.
He's getting a ton of volume and he's cheap.
How do you feel about Schultz?
Love him. Okay.
Same questions for you, Andre, as far as the tight ends. You tend to go high, tend to go low, somewhere in the mid tier. We do have Gesicki. I think Gesicki actually got skunked last week, but I think he had 7 targets and he's facing the Jets this week. Feels like a good bounce back spot. And as far as the big spends, Waller, who hasn't really done anything like since week 1, like he's been okay, but nothing we're like, well, man, I really needed to start Waller this week. Kelsey, who we've seen revive the last couple of weeks, and Kittle in well positioned against Jacksonville. What's your quick thoughts as far as tight ends?
Yeah, I would say out of those top 3, I like Waller the most, followed by Kittle, then Kelsey, in that order. That also price has to do with it a little bit too as well, but also the matchups of them. Obviously, we know. I think the shootout helps with Waller. Kittle, I think that's gonna be a one-sided game, and Kelsey he's just expensive, but we know he can get there. And in this matchup, I really like Dalton Schultz a lot too, since he's the least owned receiver out of the whole Dallas receivers. So to be able to try to have be overexplosive for sure. Mark Andrews, if Russell is in, I think you can use him as well. If not, then I probably wouldn't go with him. Probably just go with Bateman. I like getting the Colt Mccoy as well. Dan Arnold, Gesicki. Pretty much those are the main guys you want to target and go with for sure. And that's really it.
Andre, DK tournaments, do you prefer Kirk Cousins or Tannehill?
Tannehill.
Grant, are you fading the Cleveland defense special team since they're so highly owned?
No.
Yeah, I mean, the book says you're not supposed to play a really heavily owned defense, right? But, okay. Yeah, the book doesn't also say
it's
that you're
bad weather and a
Lions.
Detroit quarterback that. Yeah.
there's weather issues, and it's a person named Tim Boyle, and that whole team is in shambles. Yeah, I mean, they didn't lose last week. We'll give them that. All right. Any trepidation on rostering? Yeah, so we kind of touched on this one, Andre, but trepidation on rostering very highly owned Ingram with Tony Jones back. And I have a little bit, you seem to have very less. I have a little bit, but yeah, as far as you're still fine with Ingram, basically, right?
Yeah, I'm still fine with Ingram. I understand they have Tony Jones there, but I don't think they're gonna mess up that work. But why would you go back to giving Tony Jones a full work? Why would you give Tony Jones a full workload when you traded for Mark Ingram and then you sign him to an extension? That doesn't, to me, the logic just there doesn't make sense to me.
All right, Grant. FanDuel single entry tournament. How many projected points would you sacrifice to get Dak over Mahomes' ownership edge? So it's a game theory question for you, Grant.
I mean, how many points are you sacrificing?
Like, how many projected points are you willing to, as far as like a projected points, are you willing to like sacrifice 3 or 4?
I'd be willing to sacrifice 10 to get Dak over Mahomes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure it's not that big of a deal. Yeah. Single entry GTP for both single entry. Who is the top fade based on ownership? Dylan. I personally don't think it's Dylan because I think he's the safest of them. I hate using that term. Andre, single entry tournaments, and of course we know single entry tournaments, the good plays, the ownership gets more and more condensed. It rises up. Our ownership is projected for like the Millie Maker or like the slant or something like that. Who's your favorite guy? Favorite is a weird word to use, but your favorite guy to not play in a single entry contest that's getting a bunch of ownership, Andre?
Jeff Wilson.
That's a good answer. I like that one. You have an answer for that, Grant?
Probably one of the cheaper, chalky wide receivers. So either Gallup or Higgins.
FanDuel Cash, Ingram versus Connor. I think if it's just straight up Ingram versus Connor and like salary's not a thing, I think it's Connor over Ingram. Yeah, but I feel like their prices are a little bit different. Chase versus Jefferson. I know you like them both, Andre. Chase versus Jefferson this week.
Ooh, probably Chase.
I'm going Jefferson.
Well, that's not helpful. Grant, well, I guess this is FanDuel Cash. I think Allen versus Mahomes. I think you're supposed to play Mahomes instead of Allen, and that's that. Grant, do you need a run back in the Bears stack? It's an interesting question.
Nope.
You probably don't. I mean, like if you want Bateman's the easy one, but you definitely don't need a run back.
Prize Fix, Zeke 0.5 touchdowns. Is he going to get a touchdown this week? Can we get a touchdown from Zeke, Andre?
Yeah, I think he gets in the marks this week.
Yeah, and I think his touchdown odds are currently like to score a touchdown. I'm going to double check here, but I'm almost certain it's like minus 180.
Up against the clock. Grant, last question for you. Do you like Tua for tournaments?
Yes, especially over on SuperDraft.
All right, stay tuned. You're going to hear Beer's video, and after Beer's video is a six-pack. You're going to get Erik and Ben giving you the deep dive from a GPP perspective, and also they're going to tell you the actives and actives that drop, for the 1 o'clock games in 8 minutes. So stay tuned for that. With that, we do appreciate you all watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. And yeah, that was Andre, that was Grant, that was Devin producing. I was Dean. This was football. We're out of here. Oh, thank you.
Here back at the Fantasy Bar, 6 plays for you on Yahoo for week 11, including 4 guys under $25 to help make life easy for you. Some of my favorite correlation plays, some guys I think are too cheap, and of course, my favorite play of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 11 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack. Good to be back here once again in the Fantasy Bar talking some Yahoo with 6 of my favorite plays. Before we get into that, let's do a few housekeeping items. First of all, as always, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button on YouTube. Greatly appreciate that. That is the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, get notified when these videos are coming out. Also have a special offer for you guys over on Yahoo with some free money to use in your Yahoo contest. So click the link below for more details on that. And lastly, go and check out scoresandodds.com/beer, another link down there for you to explore all of your sports betting needs in one place. Information, trends, history, the ability to compare odds across all different sports books, and premium picks from all of your favorite Rotogrinders personalities, myself included, giving you some of my favorite bets each and every week over there. Go and check it out today. scoresandodds.com/beer. All right, let's get into week 11 here on Yahoo. Looks like a fun slate of games. Let's start at the running back position. A guy thinks in a good spot, a little bit too cheap. That's Myles Gaskin, just $18. Now I get it. Myles Gaskin, the production been absolutely horrific. You guys all out there could probably average more yards per carry than what Gaskin has drummed up over the last couple weeks. But we have to look at this workload. This guy's averaging a workhorse like 20 and a half touches per game for this Miami offense over the last 2 games, and very involved in the passing game here as well. We're talking about 5 or more targets now in 6 games already this season. We know Miami going to be without Devontae Parker, Will Fuller. So the target tree pretty limited there with Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki. Yes, you have Albert Wilson, guys like that back in the lineup. But the point being, Myles Gaskin not only going to be used on the ground, should be used a lot through the air as well. And does it get any better than a matchup with these New York Jets if you're a running back? No, it does not. Most fantasy points allowed by far. It's not even close. And already given up 17 rushing touchdowns. We're only in week 11. The Jets on pace for about 30 rushing touchdowns allowed. I think Myles Gaskin adds to that total here. As frustrating as it's been, let's get him in those lineups this week at just $18. All right, let's go to the wide receiver position. Guy thinks in a great bounce back spot this week. That's A.J. Brown of the Titans, $23. Now, big time disappointment last week in that game against New Orleans. Basically did nothing in that game. I think he bounces back in a big way here against Houston, a team he has obviously loved to play against here early on in his career. In fact, 4 career games against this team, he has scored in every single one of those games, 5 total touchdowns against the Houston Texans with over 100 yards in 3 of those 4 games. And we know this Houston defense, absolutely atrocious. In fact, over the last 4 weeks, only 1 team worse against wide receivers, 2nd most fantasy points allowed over that stretch here. I think Brown bounces back in a big way here against the Houston Texans. All right, let's go to the tight end position. A lot of premium tight ends, too easy. We want to go down a little bit deeper. We're going to roll with Colt Mccoy of Chicago, $15. Now I get it. Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Andrews, those guys are very productive, probably very good choices for your daily fantasy lineups. But let's get a little bit different here with Colt Mccoy. Now, we're coming off a bye here, but before that, we saw season highs in catches, targets, and receiving yards against a much better defense than what he's going to see this week with the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, they're solid, but Pittsburgh, one of the elite defense we have in the NFL. Baltimore has really struggled with tight ends this season as well. So 3rd most fantasy points allowed to this position. And I spoke about this game over on my Fanduel Draftkings 6-pack. Make sure you guys are checking that out as well. But I really think we could get more of a shootout here than this 45-point total indicates. So Colt Mccoy, not the sexiest name, not the easy name here at tight end, but a guy I think could be very productive here in this matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. All right, we like Colt Mccoy. Hell, let's pair him up with his quarterback. That's right, Justin Fields, just $21. Now, Fields certainly one of those guys you don't have to pair up. I love the rushing upside that he gives you. I love the way he's playing lately, but why not knock out the tight end with this stack? A cheap $36 stack is really going to allow you to go any direction with the rest of your lineup. So Fields, a guy I like in all formats with or without Komet. Really does not matter to me. And the recent production, once again, been really what I'm highlighting here. And the price has not had a chance to catch up to what this young man has been doing. We're talking a lot of rushing yards, 38 or more in 4 straight. So you're getting basically almost 4 points to start out the game here. We saw him go over 100 rushing yards against San Francisco, and Baltimore not been great against quarterbacks either. In fact, 10th most fantasy points allowed and 3rd most passing yards allowed. I think you're going to see this team be a little bit more aggressive here with Justin Fields. Montgomery is back. That's certainly going to help open some things up, and his rushing ability gives us a nice ceiling in tournaments. $21 is simply too cheap for Justin Fields. All right, speaking of too cheap, let's go back to the running back position. We're rolling with Dalvin Cook of Minnesota, just $27. I was absolutely shocked by this price point. In fact, first time all season he's been under $30, and we're getting him all the way down at $27 here on Yahoo. Let's take advantage of it in this game against the Green Bay Packers. Now, we have not seen the massive game out of Dalvin Cook yet. I think it's only a matter of time before we get that 30, 35-point game, and it could certainly come here this week against Green Bay. Now, the Packers defense been playing extremely well this season. I still think they're playing a little bit over their heads. And some of the teams they've played recently, the rushing games leave a lot to be desired here. I think Minnesota is going to want to keep Aaron Rodgers and company on the sidelines here. I don't know if they're going to succeed in that or not. What I do know is Dalvin Cook is going to get the ball a ton, both on the ground and through the air, and a little bit of history on his side here as well. Absolutely dominated Green Bay, over 200 yards and 5 touchdowns against them in 2 games last season. Simply put, Dalvin Cook, way too cheap here on Yahoo at just $27. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 11 on Yahoo. But before we do that, we want to continue our Beast of the Week contest, free to play. This is a thank you to you guys for hanging out, checking out the videos, hitting that thumbs up button. All you got to do is get in the comment section right below the video and guess fantasy points for my favorite play on Yahoo for week 11. The closest guess is going to win themselves a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. That's right. We'll send it right to you. Best, softest, most luxurious t-shirt you will ever wear. I promise you that. So without further ado, let's take a look at my favorite play for week 11 on Yahoo. You know I'm asked, the Beast of the Week. All right, Beast, time we owe you one more wide receiver. We're going to go a little correlation here as well. We're going to the other side of that Minnesota Green Bay game. We're going with Davante Adams, $35, this week's Beast of the Week. I absolutely love this spot here for Davante Adams. You pair him up with Dalvin Cook.
What is going on, guys? And welcome to another GPP Final Takes show on Rotogrinders.com. Week 11, the chaos week, even more, somehow more chaotic than every other NFL. Every week it feels like it's crazy. And now this week, I mean, just minutes ago, we got another bombshell amongst a laundry list of bombshells for week 11 that I will get into. As always, I am your host, Erik Beimfohr. You can find me on Twitter at Erik Beimfohr, and I'm joined by my co-host Ben Gretch at Yards Per Gretch on Twitter, and the author of the Stealing Signals fantasy football newsletter, mostly fantasy focused, but you can just learn a ton from Ben's newsletter, where every week he breaks down every single fantasy relevant player, even more than just the fantasy relevant players, to talk about kind of what's signal, what's noise from the results that we're seeing, which obviously is super important and is going to be super important today with all of the kind of chaos of this week 11. So Ben, we were talking a little bit before the show, obviously not going to bury the lead. Lamar Jackson just got ruled out for today, and that obviously has a ton of impact on the slate, particularly with the fact that one of his teammates, Hollywood Brown, was also ruled out. So now we have a pretty chaotic situation for the Ravens. And that's just one piece to the puzzle, right? We'll get into a ton of these other injured players, right? Alvin Kamara is out. Aaron Jones is out. Amari Cooper is out. I'm sure that I'm missing Allen Robinson is out. I mean, it is an insane list of all pro players that are out today. How are you kind of just generally thinking about approaching the slate, especially now with the Lamar news?
Well, I mean, yeah, the Lamar news changes things on the quarterback side as far as how I'm thinking or approaching the slate. We have clear running back value again. I think last week, we talked a little bit about not playing the chalky running backs together necessarily. What was it, D'Ernest and Ingram, right? And then we talked a lot about Ramondre as an interesting pivot. It turned out that playing all three of those guys was the right way to go. But Ingram got there with a late wheel route for, a 30-year-old running back. He catches a TD with, a little bit of, some air yards under it. D'Ernest gets there sort of just on receptions in a game where they get absolutely crushed. He has a really nice early drive running the ball. They score those 7 points. Browns never score again. And he ends up catching 8 balls or whatever. Basically, the way that I was thinking about this slate is,
you have to be able to recognize what happened last week. There were paths to those guys basically not getting there. One of the things, big ones we talked about was Christian McCaffrey. I think he was sort of my flag plant last week, was like, how often do you get Christian McCaffrey at 10% and like, what was it, 8,100 or something on DraftKings? And that panned out. It just wasn't optimal because of the way that the cheap running backs hit, right?
And he was close, and he was still close to. I will get into more of this, but some of the nuance of him and Dalvin Cook also. There's some interesting things about, if a couple balls, right? If Ingram doesn't catch that, if a couple of balls break different ways, last week looks very different, and it's easy to get lost. It's easy to get lost in the fact of look at all those cheap running backs, and it's not the same this week, but we do have a lot of like quote unquote value.
That's close, exactly my point. It's very similar this week, and I think it's going to be easy for people to jam it. I mean, you run any optimizer, you're going to get, Jeff Wilson and Ingram's there again, and who's the other one that's not on top of my head for whatever reason? But AJ Dillon, right? And Connor is also there. You can pivot to off Dillon. Dillon's the sort of the obvious smash everybody wants to play, but that doesn't have to be the correct construction just because it was last week is sort of the key way I'm thinking of the slate.
Yeah, I think this slate, I admittedly really struggled with last week, and it's kind of funny because like old school DFS, like last week was like old school DFS. Like you just get the value running backs, you jam them, right? You spend up at wide receiver, you get your superstars, and you print money. Obviously, the ecosystem has figured that out too, right? You used to be able to get, and now Ramondre was the problem is like, even when Ramondre was a pivot, it didn't gain you that many raw points for it to really matter. And so, playing through all of this roster construction stuff and the fact that, the whole space has really gotten smarter this week, I feel, I guess, a little bit more comfortable. Maybe we'll show up next week and I'll have totally bricked this one, because I do have maybe some really bad takes. But again, we'll get to that. But Kenneth Gainwell also out. Not that matters, but Miles Sanders is back. Another kind of injury thing. So this week, I think we're going to see, the other like big, not to bury the lead, is we have one game in particular that stands out, like maybe above the season, like definitely above the entire slate and above the season. And so I know everybody plays a lot of different contests and such. I focus a little bit more, and I think you do a lot of the times focus a little bit more on a little smaller field, more single entry type stuff. And I think the ownership on that Cowboys and Chiefs game might really, really, really run away from us, like really run away from us in those tournaments. Because it just comes together so easy. Right now, we even have, if you want to go crazy and go to guess it's not crazy, to a value Tyler Huntley, right? Obviously, Rashad Bateman has opened up to you. Michael Gallup in that game has opened up to you. There's so much value to be able to get Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, whoever you really want. And so what I kind of think about this slate is not to ignore that game. That game's going to score the most points on the slate. You don't have to like just say, outright fade it. I do think you can, but you don't have to outright fade it. But figuring out how to kind of get unique around that, right? Whether it's attacking a different game, right? I don't know what is going to happen now. We'll get updated ownership shortly to like the Tyler Huntley ownership, to the Rashad Bateman ownership. I don't know. I imagine it's going to get worse, but I also don't know, right? And then we have these other games that like are kind of all middling. I have a few that I like, and we'll get into some of those stacks. But I think the clear and easiest way to get different on this slate is two things: is a game stack that is maybe not quite as popular, and it's at the running back position. And I think that we kind of did this last week. The running back position to me again is like kind of crazy. $8,900 Christian McCaffrey showed you everything you wanted to see last week, like, and then some. Just didn't get in the box. Got vultured by freaking Cam. Cam is back
and got tackled inside the 2-yard line 3 times. Or stepped out of bounds at the 2 and got tackled at the 1 twice for McCaffrey. So,
and now, and so Diggs 1 Nep. Sorry if I screwed up your name. Is asking. I'm glad that you asked that, because it's led into where I want to start the running back thing, and it's actually at the top, which is funny because we have all this value in AJ Dillon. But I think Christian McCaffrey is like the most interesting situation when we factor in ownership, leverage, roster construction, and all that, when everyone else is going to the Tyreek Hills and the Devontae Adams and the Stephon Diggs and AJ Browns and whatever. We have the guy who all summer we drafted as the 101 in fantasy, has done nothing but prove to us why he did that. Gets a matchup against Washington that's now without Chase Young and Montez Sweat, so it's a little bit of a better spot. And I'm not sure that the matchup ever matters for him right. anyways. And he's going to be higher owned than last week. But he's still not gonna. The ownership is not gonna get away from us by any stretch of the imagination. So how are you dealing with Christian McCaffrey or any of the other spend ups, since they do kind of stick out to me as kind of a way to be unique on this slate?
I think McCaffrey is a strong play. I think he's a smart way to pivot, just like last week. I mean, it's not really a surprise. I mean, I liked it last week and just started off saying that he could have been the right play. Right? There are paths to basically McCaffrey, Ramondre, or something like that being just an absolute smash last week instead of playing Ingram or Dearness, but they did get there, both of those guys. I think people are really concerned about Newton, somewhat rightfully so. Completely different offense and everything, but the last time Newton was in Carolina as the long-term starter, he started 14 games in 2018, and McCaffrey caught 107 balls. He had 1,900 and 65 total yards. He had 13 touchdowns. This wasn't McCaffrey's monster season, which was 2019, where Newton went down early and it was basically like Kyle Allen the whole year dumping off to him. But he caught, people are concerned about the receiving because Newton runs and ran kind of a run heavy offense in New England. We're not projecting Newton in New England. We're projecting him in a totally different Carolina offense. I do think they might be run heavy. I do think they might go slow.
Yeah.
Newton's catching a decent amount of ownership. I think that's probably a mistake because they've talked about still using PJ Walker some. But like you said, the thing that I always go back to with Christian McCaffrey is he is an elite route runner. He is essentially like a prime Wes Welker out of the backfield. I mean, he runs those option routes a lot like the slot receivers that you see, the Wes Welkers, today's day and age, people love to talk about like Hunter Renfro's route running ability out of the slot. He comes out, attacks a linebacker straight at him whenever they have man coverage, and either is going to break in or break out. It's a very simple route, and he's always open every time. I mean, he's very, very good at it.
Yeah.
And look, PJ Walker last week, I was a little bit concerned. I mean, we talked about on the show, he was, McCaffrey was sort of my conviction play at the end, but I was concerned about Walker being mobile and whether he'd throw to McCaffrey as much. Made the same case last week, and we saw it play out. Walker just dumped it to McCaffrey over and over and over again. I don't think there's any reason to think that can't happen with Cam, basically. And then the other point, he stepped out at the 2 on a play that was called a TD initially. They reviewed it. He was clearly out. He also got down to the 1, then got a carry at the 1 and got stuffed. Then Cam Newton got the rush attempt that time. And then when he stepped out at 2, that was later. That was prior to Cam's passing TD. Yes, Newton's going to play in at the goal line, but just because Newton got both the TDs there last week does not mean that, McCaffrey couldn't have, essentially, right? He very easily could have had a 2-touchdown game on both of those drives where Newton got the TDs. McCaffrey could have been it. So, I'm fully comfortable playing McCaffrey. I think he's a strong play if you want to, get curious with the build. The other thing you mentioned, the Dallas Kansas City game. My big thought on that and the big note on that is that it's in the afternoon window, right? And so, or the late window. I'm Pacific time, so I always call it the afternoon window. People on the East Coast always give me crap about that, but it's in the late window, and so we know there's ways to play it with late swap, and I think you have to be smart about it with late swap. I mean, like Gallup is a guy that if Cooper was active, I still wanted to play. I've been really interested in Gallup since week 1. I thought his role was very strong in week 1. Last week, we see him come back and get targeted a couple of times early. He has kind of a bad drop on a slant. He catches the ball and goes out at the 1 before one of Ezekiel Elliott's short touchdowns. He was involved in ways that game last week could have had, an extra reception, and it could have had a TD if he's gets in instead of out at the 1. And he basically pushed Dalton Schultz kind of to the back burner. And it's been somewhat clear. He's only played 2 games, but somewhat clear that he's been a part of what they want to do in the week 1 game and last week, to me at least. And before Amari was out, I was interested in that. Now that Amari is out, it makes it really challenging, especially when you talk about these small fields. But I still I don't want to not play him in a situation where it's a great situation. They're going to throw a ton. He's cheap. I think he's really good. I don't think he's that much different than, Amari Cooper from a talent standpoint. And you're getting him at a very cheap, he should be played in a lot of lineups, but the way to play him, because he's in the late slate, is with some early contrarian options. If you hit on some of that early, then you can play him late. If you don't, then you have to have a pivot ready. You have to be able to mix things up. And there are a lot of options in the late slate that you can switch off of. So I have that as one of my big notes this week. You need early hits to play Gallup late, and really to play the Casey Dallas game at all late. Late swap is going to be really important this week.
Bingo. I couldn't have said it any better. That was something when we got into some of the stacks, because I have a couple per usual. I have something that most people are going to probably laugh at, but I think that premise, whether you agree with some of the maybe takes that I have or takes that other people here on shows this morning on Rotogrinders have, you can't really just like go in, play a little bit of the chalk early, right? Say like, and this is actually true. Some of the afternoon games are like the best game. We definitely have the best game. We could argue we have the two best games. Without Kyler, I don't know about the third best game, but if Kyler were playing, we might have the three best games of the entire slate on the afternoon. The pricing is appealing on essentially everyone. So you could, in theory, say, right, just give me a couple of these early guys, and then I'm just going to load up on these afternoon games and kind of figure it out. The issue is in tournaments, that sounds okay at your first thought, but then in practice, you get to the afternoon and you have no idea where you stand. Right? Because all the people have all those same, like you got T. Higgins, you got Tyreek Hill, you got Michael Gallup, you got Mahomes, you got, whoever else is popular back there. Maybe it's James Conner or, Tyler Lockett, whatever guy that ends up being popular in those afternoon CD, right? You Travis Kelce, definitely on FanDuel in particular. You get to the afternoon and it's like, even if you had like one chalk piece early and it did well, you have no idea what to do because everybody else has all of the same guys that you have. However, if you attack something just slightly different, you don't have to play 1% guys, but you just take a slightly kind of a unique stand. And it could be a running back and a defense. It could be play Christian McCaffrey and the Panthers defense, right? We'll get to like the Brown, we'll get to some defense situations and stuff like that. But like something, stack one game, and it could be skinny stacks. Maybe we don't project Tyler Huntley, which again, we'll get to him too. Like maybe Tyler Huntley and Rashad Bateman, is a unique way to approach the slate, but do something in the early window to give yourself outs, basically, because you need those outs to figure out what you have to do. I think that's the thing that gets lost a lot of the times in the late swap thing. And I do think, and have heard a lot of people talk about late swap this week, it is important, but you have to like you said, attack it in a way that allows you to actually use it well. Like it's not, late swap isn't just late swap because you get to change your lineup. Late swap is late swap because you have more information and now can gain expected value on your teams because you have information based on how your team is done and what not even just like what the field has done. Maybe somebody is high, maybe Tyler Huntley is the chalk. And like you see that now and you're like, oh crap, that totally changes everything, right? People played a cheap quarterback. They didn't play an expensive quarterback, blah, blah, blah. So all that stuff is really important. And I do think that was I'm glad we talked about it because it's a very important kind of macro take about this slate. So let's talk about running backs just real quick. We got a lot of questions on some different guys, and I do want to pivot to kind of the different cheaper price tier. We can talk about like Dalvin and stuff. I don't know that there's anything super crazy to talk about any of the other expensive guys, maybe Chubb, but we'll get to it. Jeff Wilson, okay, is probably the shining example other than AJ Dillon, but I don't think there's a ton to talk about with AJ Dillon relative to Jeff Wilson. We're getting a lot of questions like, is he going to get the full workload, right? We pretty much know he's not going to catch passes, but like now we have like a Ravens-esque situation in the backfield in terms of the 49ers, right? No Mostert, Sermon is not even a thing anymore. Eli Mitchell is out. Jermichael Hasty is out. Now we have Jeff Wilson in just his second game back. They've been using Kyle Juszczyk in as the passing down guy. They put Debo in the backfield for a good bit last week. You're the signal noise guy. How are you kind of figuring out this Jeff Wilson and overall 49ers situation with their backfield?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's certainly really tough to read into anything. I would feel a lot better about Jeff Wilson if he was efficient last week, because I do think Kyle Shanahan over a longer period tends to go with the guys that are actually performing. He got 10 carries last week. He only got 28 yards. Obviously, yards per carry, not like a sticky stat, are very important at all. But it is something where, like, if he would have ran 10 times for 50 yards and at 5 yards a carry, I'd feel a lot better about him, just building on that this week. Last year was not a guy who caught a lot of passes, had some huge games, but it was, running efficiently and he got a lot of volume in near the goal line. And he had 7 rush TDs last year, and had 3 starts, mostly in a part-time role. One of those starts, he had, a 3 TD rushing game, very efficient rushing game, over 6.5 yards per carry. The issue for me is, where is he physically? Because, I thought he looked fine last week, but we didn't see anything big out of him. Yep. Trey Sermon has looked efficient this year. I know he's been doghoused a million times. But like you said, they brought Debo into the backfield. They've used check in interesting ways in the backfield. This does not, to me, scream that he should be at the ownership level that everyone is projecting, that we're expecting to see. And so for me, that makes him a lot easier of a fade than, say, like AJ Dillon, to your point, who also I think is a reasonable fade. I mean, we have several ways to play running back, and the ownership is up there on these guys. Mark Ingram is the other one that is projecting really high. They do have Tony Jones active now off IR. Last week they didn't. Is that going to influence? Ingram got 80+% of the snaps. Is it going to be a slower game with the Eagles being so run heavy over the last month? And is Ingram not going to, he ends up catching that wheel route TD? Is he going to be down at 60% snaps, 65% snaps, and not going to have as much play volume and not necessarily have that, that receiving TD that he had last week that really helped him get there as like a 10-point play or close to it? And I mean, I think there's paths for these guys to fail, but Wilson is the one, like you said, that to me just stands out as like, look, it's a great matchup. We saw it last year when he was a starter. We saw these big performances, but there is not a lot to go off here. He's played one game, he's rushed 10 times and not been particularly efficient. So there's certainly paths to fail. It's just a wide error bar type of a situation.
When we get into the stacks and some of the like more tournament type stuff outside of running back, I got some takes that piggyback off the Jeff Wilson thing. I think a lot of the pass game guys are the most interesting parts of the 49ers, particularly with the Jeff Wilson ownership on both sides. But I mean, he's 5K on FanDuel. So I know that it's tough to get away from that, but I do think so I know pass catching is not that important on FanDuel, not that important also on another site, Yahoo. Jeff Wilson also cheap on Yahoo, and Yahoo similar, same scoring as FanDuel. So if you want to get away from the Jeff Wilson chalk and go over to Yahoo and use promo code Grinders25, you'll get a free $25 bonus on your first deposit. But I think on sites like FanDuel and Yahoo, people forget kind of that the passing thing is still important, because it just gives you outs to things, and it just gives you a floor of things. And like you said, this guy could come out and run 12 times. He ran 10 times for 28 yards last week. And I know this is the Jags. I know, in theory, the game script sets up well, blah, blah, blah. But NFL is chaos. We just saw a week and a half ago, we just saw the Ravens get curb stomped by the Dolphins, who have been basically the Dolphins could barely beat the Texans, right? We saw the Jags beat the Bills. We've seen chaos in the NFL. And so it seems like everything is roses for Jeff Wilson. But when you don't have a full role and you're fresh off, injured reserve, he isn't just fresh off, he kind of got dinged up. The guy was out for months, months and months. And he's just we don't know what kind of workload he can carry. So I understand on FanDuel and Yahoo particularly, he's extremely appealing. But I kind of think he makes for the best tournament fade that exists. We don't even know that he'll get the goal line carries. They gave Debo the ball in the goal at the goal line last week.
And to add to your point about, basically weird things can happen. San Francisco played Monday night last week, short week. They're a West Coast team traveling very far, playing in the early window, playing 10 a.m. body clock game. You can, take that or leave it. But on a 6-day week, it is a tough situation for them to turn around and be very physically dominant up front and run the ball all game to a point where Jeff Wilson runs for 150 yards. I mean, it's just one more small thing that I'm adding in where it's there's a lot of pass. And I totally agree with your point on the receiving. Yes, it's only half points per reception, but the average yards per reception is typically about twice as high as the average yards per catch. It's about 8 yards per reception for running back, about 4 yards per carry for a running back, obviously. You can pick up those yardage, that yardage when you're catching. But you get a half a point, and you typically get more yards. You have the potential for a screenplay to break for 25 yards, which is a little easier, I think, to do than a running play going for 25 yards. So completely agree with you. There's still a lot of value in the running game. Like you said, it gives you multiple outs, gives you the receiving yardage. And, if you catch 8 balls, you get 4 points, even in, half PPR. That's not an insignificant number.
Exactly. And so, and it also is like also a partial, there's correlation between the fact that whether you're just catching the balls and the role that you have, right? And we'll get to a couple guys that I think are interesting that have popped up now at the running back position, which I didn't expect, in particular one, maybe 2. But anyway, the Jeff Wilson thing is like, yes, he's not catching balls, but it's a sign of a role, right? If the game goes awry, I'm not expecting that, but crazy stuff happens. The game goes awry, or like you said, they just decide to throw, or they're having more success with Debo back there, or whatever. Like, he's just not even on the field. It's one thing to not get thrown the ball, right? Derrick Henry would be on the field still and just not get thrown the ball. This guy won't even be on the field. And that's like a real issue, because then you can't even get into audibles. You can't get into hurry up, right? You can't get into anything when that happens. So those are just the kind of guys that I know, it looks, it's kind of like people bring the NBA syndrome over to NFL. You're like, he's just way too cheap. He's just way too cheap. And like, I get it. But if he gets 60 yards and no touchdowns, you don't get more points because he's cheap.
Yeah.
You still need the points. He needs to do stuff to win. And it's an event-based game. And so he's just the kind of guy, he's going to come out and run for 100. He's going to do the 49ers running back Jeff Wilson thing, right? The 3 touchdown game or whatever now that we're talking about this. But I think those are the guys that are the plus EV fades kind of no matter what their price is. The other thing that we kind of talked about, we'll finish up running back here and get to some of the stacks. I know people like to talk about stacks, and then we'll open it up for questions. There's a lot of running backs you can play on this slate. Like, news that just dropped that kind of has me a little shook is Salvon Ahmed is not active for the Dolphins. And I don't want to play Dolphins running backs. Trust me, they're not a fun thing to click. They cannot run the ball. I am not sure that matchup matters for them to be able to run the ball. However, this is a good matchup for them to run the ball. They're going to throw to their running backs, period. Anyway, Malcolm Brown is on IR, and now Salvon Ahmed is out. I assume that
Duke
means
Johnson.
I assume that means that, I saw that Duke Johnson got called up from the practice squad and Laird is there. So does that do anything for you for a Myles Gaskin in a matchup with the Jets? And then there's, is there any other running backs? I got a couple just to touch on when you're done, but are there any kind of other running backs that you want to bring up?
I would just say for Gaskin, it's kind of a hard no for me because he's been so inefficient. And I know we love to overstate how efficiency can regress. It can, it might, but Gaskin for the last 5 games has been at 2.3 yards per carry. I think it is. I think it was 3.7 yards per target. I wrote about it in Signals this week. His first 5 games, good, very efficient last year. But when you see it for an extended stretch from a running back who's pretty inefficient, typically to me, number one, that's not a good sign that he's physically at a point where he can, be just bounce right back and be efficient. We think of that regression happening so quick. We need not just stable efficiency or league average when he's been below. We need plus efficiency for these big blow up games. You need guys to be able to be, hitting big plays, making big things happen. Obviously, he's a lot less likely to do that when he hasn't done that over 5 weeks than, Jonathan Taylor. People want to fade his efficiency every week, but the dude is a superstar. Every single play, He looks like he's untackleable. He's so fast, so big. I think there are elements to efficiency that we overlook. And for Gaskin, it's been so bad that I just don't want to go there. The second side of it is Miami, from a usage standpoint, this coaching staff has done things like just push Gaskin down to 20% snap shares randomly. They've done it this season. They've done it in past seasons. We don't necessarily know who's going to be the lead guy. There are paths today where they said Duke Johnson has looked great in practice all week, and we're making him our workhorse back today. I mean, if that happens, don't be surprised. But I don't think that's particularly likely. You think you can play Gaskin? I would just say that between the combination of those two things, we don't know how they're viewing Duke, and he's this new back and this new wrench in a system that Gaskin came out of nowhere starting early last year. They can just use backs in weird ways on a week-to-week basis. And then obviously Gaskin himself not performing at a level to me that gives me any reason to want to play him. I want to play good players. There are good players you can play at reasonable prices that you actually think can be efficient and good. So I'm not on Gaskin at all.
Yeah, I support that. You know, it's funny because the chat was bringing it up, and I think it's a very important thing to talk about when we get this late news, especially they're playing the Jets, and he's cheap. He catches passes right. It's important. It's important to talk about, but it's natural to just be like, holy crap, his backup is inactive. We got to play him, right? But when you take a step back and you think about everything that you just outlined, and even like to make it like even more simple, they just took away basically like an early down grinder. I know Ahmed can kind of catch passes, or, you know, he caught a few last year or whatever, but like he was kind of the guy that would spell him on these early downs. And so, yeah, now maybe Gaskin's first and second down role on a team with the worst offensive line in the league, right, is secure. But what if like the only things that Duke and Patrick Laird can do is they're receiving backs. That's all they've done for their entire career. So now if he loses the pass game role, it's like you're playing an inefficient early down Dolphins running back. You know, I know the matchup is good. And so just thinking those things through is important on these news items, right? Another news item, we talked about the Lamar thing, right? Who I think this sneakily is kind of really good for, David Montgomery. David Montgomery is 5,500 on DraftKings. This is not someone I like to stand for. Okay. David Montgomery is not my kind of guy, but they pretty much made it known last week that he's back to the workhorse. Yep. Right. You talked about, him, and you talk about everybody in your newsletter, but like, he's back to being the man. The opposing team now does not have, the MVP or the, near league MVP. They also are missing their best passing game option, and they're running the ball with Latavius Murray and Devonta Freeman. This is not the Ravens of old. They could just get stonewalled here, which could mean David Montgomery, like, wheels up, give me the ball for, this is Matt Nagy's wet dream, right? I don't have to make Justin Fields do anything. I just turn around and hand the ball off to David Montgomery 30 times. So he's a guy that has really kind of jumped out for me. If you want to pair him with the Bears defense, I think you can do that too. But I think he makes for a really interesting tournament play now.
I think that's a great call. Yeah, and the Bears have shown a willingness to go run heavy, right? When they have any type of positive script. So if things go well for them, it's a really nice correlation with the Bears D, which, someone in the chat just asked, are they going to get, steamed and played at a high rate? I think that's possible. I also think there's been so much discussion all week about the other defenses, the Browns you mentioned facing, what's his face, Tim Boyle, insurance salesman Tim Boyle. I think it's pretty easy actually to pivot over to the Bears, and probably that they're going to come in quite a bit lower than they should, because we haven't known about this all week, right? So nobody was playing them before because they're facing Lamar Jackson. It's only the people that think through that and are like, I'm going to change up my rosters, or I'm building them this morning and make sure to get onto the Bears. Certainly there's going to be a good chunk of people that do that, but I do think because they haven't been in the discussion all week, they will go a little bit forgotten about. People don't spend a lot of time sitting there thinking about their defense.
Definitely. And so I think that the running back thing, I wanted to bring up Montgomery specifically because he's just kind of a point on. Look, I love AJ Dillon. You and I talked about you got me to be like super, super excited this offseason about AJ Dillon. I think that's fairly clearly been proven to be a sharp take. Everyone should be excited for AJ Dillon, right? The Jeff Wilson thing makes sense. You could even talk about a Deonta Foreman or something like that with McNichols out, and obviously Derrick Henry out against the Texans, right? There's a lot of these running backs that make sense and are garnering ownership for the perfect reasons. But I think given the strength of that Cowboys game, given the strength of the afternoon slate and what we might want to do, and a somewhat relative lack of like really high end games, that I think running back is a really easy way, right? Play David Montgomery, and if you want to play the Bears defense, play, not a Gaskin thing. Play Christian McCaffrey and David Montgomery, and maybe pay down at a receiver spot that somebody isn't, and like boom, you're pretty much unique right there. Now you probably can't just like play all the chalk aside from that, but you know what I mean. You don't have to do anything crazy. And are you really giving up any points, right? That's a big thing about being unique, is like being unique just to be unique doesn't get you anywhere. Being unique and contrarian while really not giving up any points, that's the game. I want to make the best team as I can with the lowest ownership as I can. And to me, something like a David Montgomery and a Christian McCaffrey, or, if you have a different running back, you're not giving up points to the AJ Dillon and whoever teams. And like, if those guys don't get in the end zone, boom, like you now play Tyreek Hill and Michael Gallup in the afternoon and print all the money, So I think the running back thing was important to kind of dive into. So let's get into, go ahead.
But before we move on, I'll just say this really quick, but there's this comment to, play David Montgomery in a committee instead of Wilson. David Montgomery played 85% of the snaps in their last game. They're on a bye last week, 2 weeks ago. I think it was 14 of the 17 running back touches or 14 of the 18 or something. I mean, 85% snaps, ran all the routes. Like, that's not a committee. He might be, I guess, this week. You think that now that he's got a bye week off, that he's going to be in a committee? Jeff, like, that's oversimplifying. Is sort of just the point I want to make, not to necessarily call out one of the viewers, but Wilson very well could play a higher snap percentage today. I actually think Montgomery is the odds-on favorite to play a higher snap percentage than Wilson. Like, he's the one that's more likely to be the workhorse. Wilson, we talked about all the potential issues with Juszczyk and everyone else. So it's different in different offenses, but like, that's the type of thing where you can catch yourself oversimplifying it. That's, I think, a mistake.
How many running backs do you think project to play a higher percentage of the snaps than David Montgomery on this slate?
Not a lot.
A couple? Only a couple.
Maybe one or two. Yeah.
And so Damian Williams is out, right? Still, Damian, and
yes.
he didn't matter. He's it's over. It's tent time for Damian Williams. It's Khalil Herbert, because he flat out outplayed Damian while David Montgomery is out, and Herbert has now already been cast aside. So I think, and that does it. We'll get into the stacks here in just 1 second, but that does actually bring up another good point about like the running back thing. Is like, just about everybody is in committees, right? And so when we get these, that's part of why AJ Dillon is so appealing, right? And I think you can fade AJ Dillon, but I don't think you have to fade AJ Dillon. The Mark Ingram thing is like, I kind of think he's going to be back in a committee, right? He's the lead in the committee, but like, he's back into a committee with Tony Jones back, in my opinion. Myles Gaskin, we just talked about how he might be in a committee. Jeff Wilson is 100% in a committee. It just so happens like a wide receiver is a part of that committee, because they're funky. But like, running backs are basically in committees now. So when you get the rare situation, like 85% of snaps, that's actually really valuable. And so I think that type of context is important. So let's talk about stacks now. We talked about running backs. We kind of talked about the macro elements of this slate. Let's set aside the Cowboys game and Chiefs game for right now, because I don't think that's going to require too much analysis. Play the dudes. That one's fairly straightforward. There are a couple of leverage plays that we will get to. Outside of that game, if you're going after a stack, where's kind of your first pivot to a different game that you really want to go after?
Well, and that's part of why Dallas and KC is going to be so popular. Is there's a few undervalued games, like you said, but there aren't a lot of great options. I really like, naturally, the next highest game is Cincinnati and Vegas. I do really like Burrow. I think you could feasibly play Carr. I'm not doing it. And then, Josh Allen is probably not going to be played at a very high rate. And I think it's very possible if Indy, especially if you get like Taylor hitting a big play early. The Colts aren't actually like a particularly slow team that are going to kill pace too much. I think Allen is, sort of a contrarian way to attack this slate. And then Huntley. Honestly, I think you can go all the way down to Huntley because he's that cheap on DK, especially. He's 4,100 on DK. It really opens up ways that you can be sort of unique with your build and more or less game stack some of the better games without the QBs. You can play like Huntley, Bateman, and that's all you play from Baltimore. Chicago, you don't even bring back or anything, just a skinny stack. It's very cheap. And then that gives you a lot of freedom to get into McCaffrey and to get into a lot of these other options.
Yep. I think that's we're talking a lot more macro, but I think the slate seems to continue to point out all of kind of like macro tournament concepts and stuff. That's something I've really been latching on to a ton this year. I think that the pricing is such that there are no real super value wide receivers, right? And then aside from last week, you don't get mega value running backs, right? And even then, the floor is now 4K. if you've been playing DFS for years, the floor even at running back used to be $3,000, and it would price all the backups in the $3,000 range. So right when someone would be out, you would get a $3,000 running back, which then you'd be like, okay, well now I'm just playing Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams or whatever because I got all this. The pricing is very different now, and the one position that allows you to still get all of the upside into your lineup without giving up really almost anything aside from a little bit of floor and a little bit of ceiling is the quarterback position, right? And it allows you to do, so I have a couple guys that we'll get into in just a second that I really, really like, but I continue to do this, right? We did it with, I did it successfully, Carson Wentz to Michael Pittman, bring it back with AJ Brown, and then you can build another game stack around that. Like, again, this week, there's one very clear one, right? Chiefs, Cowboys, but those quarterbacks are expensive. How do you fit Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce? And maybe you want to play CD? Obviously, Gallup is cheaper. How do you fit Christian McCaffrey onto those teams? It's Huntley, Bateman, right? Or I did kind of like Fields, Mooney a little bit before. Now I'm a little less psyched about the game in general. Tua is the one that really stands out to me. I think people are gravitating towards Cam, and I'm not playing Cam. I'm really not playing
Cam.
I'm not interested in Cam at all. Tua is one of my preferred cheaper guys. Again, this is mainly on DraftKings. It's just the Jets, man, and the Dolphins. The only way they can score is to throw. You also have so clear and easy single, or honestly, if you want to double him with Gesicki and Waddle or pick one, you don't have to bring it back if you don't want to. I think you can again, but you don't have to bring it back with anybody from the Jets. And just that type of roster construction, I think, is so powerful right now on DraftKings when everybody wants to do like, oh, I got to play Josh Allen double stack. I got to play Mahomes double stack. It's like you can still get all the benefits of the Josh Allen team and an extra correlated little piece there. Plus you get the savings to make it all work. So that's one of my favorite things. And I talked about Tua. I really like.
I will say it's not for the faint of heart. I've been doing it basically every week. I was talking about I played Colt McCoy last week. I mean, I've done obviously Fields several weeks. We've talked about on the show. It doesn't always work. If those QBs do hit their ceilings, they can basically box this type of lineup build out. But I mean, Huntley is a very athletic dude. I don't think it's that crazy for him to hit, 20 points. And if he hits 20 points, you're golden.
Yeah. So Huntley, I think makes sense. I don't think we were again kind of talking before the show. I'm going to be sitting here on this show like, okay, do I have to play Tyler Huntley now to make it all work? I don't think I'm going to. I actually really like that. I knew that you were. We didn't even need to talk about
ask.
I knew that you were. Like I said, my favorite option for that is Tua. Tua is the guy for me that maybe he isn't aesthetically pleasing watching. He doesn't have a cannon for an arm. He's left-handed. I don't think people like left-handed quarterbacks. The Dolphins are not very good, right? He's been hurt. He was quite frankly very bad last year. So I think people have this perception of Tua that he's not good for fantasy or something like that. He just goes out and scores 25 points like every week. And now he's playing the second worst, bottom, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And the only way that they can score is by throwing. So Tua is probably my preferred.
My concern is that he'll be a little popular. Do you think that might be less true, especially with Huntley?
I think he will be more popular amongst those options. I was really anchored to the Tua thing when I thought everyone was going to go to Cam. Now we have gotten Matthew posted in the chat, Rule has come out and said that PJ will probably get some playing time. No one knows what the hell that means. So I think it has soured some people on Cam, but I think there's enough now with the expensive guys. People love to play those expensive guys. I do think enough people will go to Hunt. Not a lot of people are going to Huntley, but some people will go to Huntley that it keeps the Tua ownership in check. However, here's the gross take. Okay. We got like 10 or so minutes. So we got time to talk about maybe some of the gross takes. Well, first I want to say, before I lead into this, is we talked about the Jeff Wilson thing, and it was kind of a segue foreshadowing for this. Tell me why Debo is not like the best play on this slate, like on both sides, on both sites. Given I know he has some ownership, but like if anything, I think Debo comes in lower owned than any projections say, as opposed to gaining steam, particularly with all the other options that exist. We have a wide receiver with one of the highest target shares in the NFL. I know Ayuk and Kittle are back, but like that hasn't even really changed that much for Debo against a terrible defense. The team now has no running backs. The last time they had even more running backs than this, they decided this is our best player. Let's use him at running back. He got goal line carries. He gets, you've talked about it a lot. He gets the touch, right? He gets the manufactured touches, the little freebie points.
The tip passes, jet motion tip passes.
Yep.
Yeah.
He gets the freebie points, and maybe they'll lay an egg, right? You talked about the West Coast to East Coast travel, and it's the 49ers. Sometimes they do this, but I think this is the offense that we were excited about all offseason, right? I know Trey Lance isn't in there, but like they got all their guys now. It's really concentrated. Debo is the alpha. They're going to score a lot of points. They just destroyed the Rams. They could have scored a lot more if they cared to keep the foot on the gas. They could have scored a lot more points. Like, I think that they're about to go on a tear here and blow some shit
what's
up.
Gross about this take? You said it's a gross take. You're picking the second highest scoring receiver. He's still not even priced, anywhere near the top 2 or top 3. I mean, like near, I guess, but he's, fifth priced on DraftKings. You said they could lay an egg, and I actually think that that's true. We talked about, they're traveling across the country, short week, but if they do, Debo honestly is the guy that I feel like would still get there, right? Because of all the different ways they use him, like you said. And also, look, it's kind of like a film take, whatever, but like he's a guy, when you watch him play, he's a high energy, high motor player. Like he's not a dude that like when his team is bad, he still produces because he's it's like one of the things that I always liked about Jarvis Landry way back in his young career is like the dude cares. You can call that kind of a lame take, but he tries hard. Debo plays at a very aggressive speed. I think that's a great take. Okay. I love getting up for a lot of the receivers. I like getting up for Diggs this week if possible. Yep. I always want to play Justin Jefferson. He's gonna explode at some point, and like the 35-point game from Jefferson is coming. He had, a really big game last week, but still not really looking like he's going to be rostered on a lot of teams. There's a lot of ways to playing these expensive receivers. I think that's a really interesting thing to do. Obviously, we have the cheap running back value, but I want to do it while also fitting in like an expensive running back, and that Tyler Huntley allows you to do all these things, so it's very fun.
So the grossness of the take comes in the fact that I think you can play Jimmy G as your cheap quarterback.
Okay.
And I additionally think that you can stack this game I haven't decided yet, okay, because we did get some news here this morning that has changed the slate up a little bit. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. And I don't know if I'm going to play Tua or Jimmy G, but I'm fairly locked into one of those guys on DraftKings. FanDuel, again, is a little bit different. I think, again, the 49ers are set to go absolutely bonkers here down the stretch. I think that they are going to score an absolute ton of points today. They have all their dudes back, right? Like, I don't mean to reiterate, but they have all their passing game dudes back, and they don't have any of their running backs, right? Jimmy G stinks. You're not going to find a bigger Jimmy G hater than me. I know that he doesn't run and all of that.
You're really selling us on this. The player that you want to throw.
He's going to throw for 303 at least today. He's going to come out and absolutely rip it up today. Jimmy
303. He's getting over the 300.
I was going to say four. But Debo's probably going to run one in. Okay. Debo's probably going to run one in. So Debo is my favorite part of this whole thing. But I also think that the 49ers pass defense is really bad. And I know you can play Dan Arnold if you want to as a bring back who fills up that tight end spot. I actually kind of like Marvin Jones as like the 0% owned guy in that range to catch the long bomb. Your guy Visca is finally 4,100. Jamal Agnew is like a Rashad Bateman pivot. And so Debo is like this perfect pivot at the top from the superstar wide receivers on an offense I think is going to score a ton. And then you have bringbacks at pivots, either that fill the tight end spot or that are pivots off of all the chalk in those ranges. And so that game is the game that I actually think is like going to produce a ton of fantasy goodness that nobody wants to play.
I mean, I think that's an interesting take. I would say in Jacksonville, Lawrence has really struggled to get the ball to the outside. Chenault has been a lot worse since moving to the outside after Chark got hurt. I think there's a clear correlation from a real football sense between why Arnold and Agnew have continued to produce. They're running a lot of routes out of the slot over the middle of the field, short area. So on a bring back, I would prioritize probably Arnold to fill the tight end spot, or potentially even James Robinson. Because if this game's going to blow up, James Robinson's probably the guy that does really well for Jacksonville. Yep. But yeah, no, I think obviously it works in the sense that you're pivoting off of the Jeff Wilson chalk. And if this game hits in a way that Jeff Wilson doesn't, I mean, yeah, you're going to be laughing all the way to the bank. I love that your take was Jimmy G sucks, like very convincing.
He does.
But he's the play that I want to make.
But I'm playing him. Yeah. But I like him to be clear. But I think, people get so take locked into, I can only play these types of players. I can only play these specific teams or whatever. And like it's different when you're playing, and we got a couple of minutes, so we'll wrap up, but I don't want to end on Jimmy G, but it's different when you're paying 7-8K for a quarterback, right? You do need like real upside. You do probably need some rushing equity or whatever. When you're just paying down to these guys, like Tua doesn't run that much either. What you're really betting on is them having a good game, and you're betting on the elite quarterbacks not like lapping the field, right? Mahomes goes and gets 35, your guy gets 28. The savings was more than worth it when that happens. That's what you're betting on. And so I think people get take locked into, you have to play the guy that runs. I agree, I want the guy to run, of course, but I think that there are special instances when, we can do that. And you talked about there aren't great game pivots on this slate. Like, what game do you want to play when you have Chiefs Cowboys in the afternoon? There aren't that many good ones. So I like the team playing the Jets. That's always a nice, easy de facto one for me. Like you mentioned, Huntley, you have a $4,000 quarterback that does run, or a team that I think is one of the best offenses in the league that's going to score a ton of points. So I'm just leaning there, which then allows me to get my afternoon exposure. Let me double check about a couple of questions. There was something that I missed. Here, is Huntley a cash lock? No, absolutely not. Wow. Huntley is not a cash lock. I actually would not play him in cash.
No.
I'm not playing cash, to be clear. So I don't want to give away. I'll let if you have, so again, I tried to reiterate this. I haven't been playing cash in NFLs. If you have cash questions, we're signing off in just a minute, and crunch time will be here, and those guys will hit all of those questions and more for you leading up to lock. I don't think, the guy did mention James Robinson. I agree. I think he's kind of a super interesting bring back on that game, or just running back. Again, hits on another potential workhorse running back that's affordable in a potentially exciting game. Maybe you don't.
If you're already projecting that game to blow up, and if you're playing a Jimmy G stack, you're projecting it to go over. Then James Robinson is a great play, because you have to raise the projections essentially across the board for that game, for the play volume, for everything. And he's a good pivot as well. In his price range, is a little bit more expensive than the chalky guys like AJ Dillon and stuff. So if you're going to play Jimmy G, I think I would bring it back with Robinson.
Yep, I think that makes sense. I want to hit on defense, and then we'll give our because we did get some defense questions and stuff. So we obviously have the Browns against Tim Boyle, right, at the monstrous chalk, as they rightfully should be. I like them, and I think, again, an important kind of macro take about the defenses is, some people will say like, oh, you can never play the chalky defense, and I think that's lazy. I do think you have to be extremely smart about how you're playing the Browns defense today. If you're playing a Jimmy G stack, right, like me, and you fit the Browns defense in, by all means, go ahead and fit them in. But if you're playing a Cowboys stack or whatever, I think you probably need to be pivoting off of that. I have a couple that I like. The Panthers are getting quite a bit of ownership too. We talked about the Bears. I think that the Bears, especially like if you're playing David Montgomery, make that one makes like quite a bit of sense. And then the other one that I like is, hold on, I had it written down. Oh, it's the Cowboys. I know that seems absurd to say, but if you get to the afternoon slate and like you're kind of dead, or you're like largely like fading that game, or maybe you're playing Zeke, who I think is an interesting leverage play at running back. How does that game like get gross and crappy? It's like Cowboys defense, like sacking, strip sacking Mahomes twice or something.
Well, and they can even get there in a high scoring game. I mean, that's something we see with
Yep.
defenses, right? A lot of passing late. Mahomes could throw a pick six or something. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And so
I would also throw in Miami. I know they're really expensive,
Yes.
but you get Joe Flacco, right? I mean, you're going to get some sacks. You're going to get some dumb decisions. So I like them.
Definitely. So let's wrap it up so the crunch time folks can get in here. I will lead then with the conviction play of the day. You had Christian McCaffrey last week, right? Which was Nick Bird in chat. Shout out Nick. He joined some of the Spike Week and different streams. He said Christian McCaffrey was a cumulative 4 yards from 45 points last week, which is a really funny way to frame it, right? And it's I feel like a super interesting kind of context.
I missed that. He was very close to hitting both 100-yard bonuses. Is that yeah. Oh,
and
wow. I actually kind of didn't think through that.
And it would have been 2 touchdowns also, I think. So
the touchdowns, right? Yeah,
touchdowns.
Correct. Yeah.
So 1 bonus and 2 touchdowns, I think, is what 4 yards would have been. So my take is that I'm giving 2. Christian McCaffrey is old Christian McCaffrey, and is 40 ball is gonna get those 40 plus this week at lower ownership that he should be for 8,900.
Yep.
Christian McCaffrey. And then the other one, I kind of already gave it away, but the old Jimmy Garoppolo, 303, 49ers drop a 40 spot in Jacksonville on the Jags. Our Niners, even without Trey Lance, roll.
All right. And then I'll go to tight end. We didn't talk a ton about tight end. I want to say first the John Bates dude for Washington, I think is vaguely interesting. Min priced. You can correlate with CMC. I kind of like him. I'm playing him in some spots, but the conviction play is going to be Kelsey. I think Kelsey smashes. He's he's looking like he's going to go a little bit under-owned on DraftKings relative to FanDuel and Yahoo. I like playing him at DraftKings. He's looked a lot better. He had that stinger, cost him, I think some explosiveness over a couple of weeks. We know that defenses are taking away the deep ball. I think he eats in the middle of the field today in that game. I think he's a fun way to play that game.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Getting Travis Kelce in the highest total game of the week as not chalk, and like he's
not like pure chalk. Yeah, he'll be like 12% on DraftKings, probably 15%. I think you got to smash that.
Yep, love it. Absolutely love it. All right, guys. In 5 minutes, crunch time will be in. They will round you out up until lock. Save your questions, cash games, tournaments, everything for those guys. So that is week 11 GPP final takes for me, Erik Beimfohr, my co-host Ben, and always producer Devin. We will see you guys in week 12.
Back in the Fantasy Bar, 6 plays for you on Yahoo for week 11, including 4 guys under $25 to help make life easy for you. Some of my favorite correlation plays, some guys I think are too cheap, and of course, my favorite play of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 11 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack. Good to be back here once again in the Fantasy Bar talking some Yahoo with 6 of my favorite plays. Before we get into that, let's do a few housekeeping items. First of all, as always, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button on YouTube. Greatly appreciate that. That is the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, get notified when these videos are coming out. Also have a special offer for you guys over on Yahoo with some free money to use in your Yahoo contest. So click the link below for more details on that. And lastly, go and check out scoresandodds.com/beer, another link down there for you to explore all of your sports betting needs in one place. Information, trends, history, the ability to compare odds across all different sports books, and premium picks from all of your favorite Rotogrinders personalities, myself included, giving you some of my favorite bets each and every week over there. Go and check it out today. scoresandodds.com/beer. All right, let's get into week 11 here on Yahoo. Looks like a fun slate of games. Let's start at the running back position A guy thinks in a good spot, a little bit too cheap. That's Myles Gaskin, just $18. Now I get it. Myles Gaskin, the production been absolutely horrific. You guys all out there could probably average more yards per carry than what Gaskin has drummed up over the last couple weeks. But we have to look at this workload. This guy's averaging a workhorse like 20 and a half touches per game for this Miami offense over the last 2 games, and very involved in the passing game here as well. We're talking about 5 or more targets now in 6 games already this season. We know Miami going to be without Devontae Parker, Will Fuller. So the target tree pretty limited there with Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki. Yes, you have Albert Wilson, guys like that back in the lineup. But the point being, Myles Gaskin not only going to be used on the ground, should be used a lot through the air as well. And does it get any better than a matchup with these New York Jets if you're a running back? No, it does not. Most fantasy points allowed by far. It's not even close. And already given up 17 rushing touchdowns. We're only in week 11. The Jets on pace for about 30 rushing touchdowns allowed. I think Myles Gaskin adds to that total here. As frustrating as it's been, let's get him in those lineups this week at just $18. All right, let's go to the wide receiver position. Guy thinks in a great bounce back spot this week. That's A.J. Brown of the Titans, $23. Now, big time disappointment last week in that game against New Orleans. Basically did nothing in that game. I think he bounces back in a big way here against Houston, a team he has obviously loved to play against here early on in his career. In fact, 4 career games against this team, he has scored in every single one of those games, 5 total touchdowns against the Houston Texans, with over 100 yards in 3 of those 4 games. And we know this Houston defense, absolutely atrocious. In fact, over the last 4 weeks, only one team worse against wide receivers, 2nd most fantasy points allowed over that stretch here. I think Brown bounces back in a big way here against the Houston Texans. All right, let's go to the tight end position. A lot of premium tight ends, too easy. We want to go down a little bit deeper. We're going to roll with Colt Mccoy of Chicago, $15. Now I get it. Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Andrews, those guys are very productive. Probably very good choice.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another week of Rotogrinders NFL Crunch Time. I'm Justin Carlucci alongside of Kristi and Tuttle, and Devin is producing as usual. So what's going on, Kristi? Good to see you again.
Hey, good to see you guys too. I know I'm kind of excited about this slate, anxious to hear what you guys have to say too, but there's a lot of plays that I liked. It seemed like it came together a little bit better for me this week, but always good to talk through with you guys.
Definitely. It was a lot of Michael Gallup, Cowboys, Chiefs talk week. And then it was, well, is Lamar going to play? And at least we got that answer well enough ahead of time. So Tuttle, I can't wait to hear your input on, kind of things in that game, the Baltimore game, with the spread massively moving. And just, amongst many other things today with the Cowboys and the Chiefs incoming chalk and things like that. So how are you today, man? Did things kind of play out as you expected to leading up to this point?
I'm doing well, and yeah, I mostly have the biggest piece of news that kind of went against me this weekend was the thought that CEH is going to be active for the game today, because I thought Darrell Williams was an excellent tournament option. If CEH was out, I kind of still think he's a really good tournament option. So it's trying to figure out how much exposure to have to Darrell Williams, because I think he's an absolute smash play if he gets 80% of the running back workload there, which I don't think is out of the question. But that's the one that has me most puzzled. Everything else has kind of gone, I think, as expected, but I'm still hung up on the Kansas City news.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting way to get a chunk of that game at probably some pretty low ownership, because there's some really intriguing prices on a lot of running backs, especially on FanDuel. But we will get to that momentarily. A couple quick plugs. The DFS OGs League, if you're playing on FanDuel this week, sign up for the DFS OGs FanDuel contest for week 11 and compete against our guys like Beard, Chop, and Noto. FanDuel.com/OGs show is the way to sign up there. BetMGM, as usual, we say it every week, and it's a great deal. Use your bonus code GRINDERSBET. That's all one word, GRINDERSBET, and bet $10 to get $200 instantly when your team scores a touchdown. Over there on Yahoo, the promo code is Grinders25 with a capital G, Grinders25 for a free $25 bonus on your first deposit. And we might be a bit of a broken record here, but if you don't have Rotogrinders Premium by now, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. A lot of great stuff we have, and you can really customize the packages that you're looking to based upon what sports you play and the whole 9 yards. So without further ado, we got 12:32 Eastern time here. And I guess it's worth noting, Devin was telling me before the show about a Kevin Roth special he had over there from Scores and Odds, a little 3-leg parlay. But the reason I'm saying that is it was all weather related. So there are a couple of games that Roth does have labeled as orange, I believe, and I'm working on that right now. By the way, congrats to Kevin Roth, who had a baby this week. So awesome stuff. Little weatherman in the house. So congrats, Kevin. Anyway, yeah, so Houston at Tennessee is orange on a Roth's color model. Might start dry, says Kevin, but it's not going to stay dry. Curious how that impacts AJ Brown and maybe some other things there, as Brown looks to carry some ownership and is the volume guy in Tennessee right now, regardless. Indy at Buffalo, another one that should start dry, but won't finish that way. And Detroit and Cleveland, oh God, what an ugly game as it is. And now we're going to throw some weather into the mix. So now that we got all that stuff out of the way, let's go position by position. Drop your questions and comments in the chat, and we will get to them in the second half of this show here. So, Kristi, you are first on my screen here. So we'll start with you and talk to me about quarterbacks today and what you're looking at.
Yeah, so for quarterbacks, I think we are going to see a lot of chalk condensed on a few different players. So it's a little bit interesting to, there's some interesting takes for tournaments, but, I think Mahomes checks in as the top play. It's hard to see why not. I mean, Mahomes finally had that breakthrough game that we were, expecting a lot earlier in the season. But I think Mahomes is obviously a fantastic play this week, makes a great cash game play. You've got Josh Allen up there this week too, who always makes a, very good play, good matchup going against Indy. So he's right up there in the conversation. Burrow obviously is a great play too. I've been playing him quite a bit this year in GPPs. I think we have him at about 10% ownership right now. But great matchup there against Las Vegas. It's an indoor game. He should thrive in that matchup. Dak Prescott on the other side, it seems like maybe our ownership is a little bit low on that, but if so, makes a great tournament play. We know Amari Cooper's out, but you've got Lamb and Gallup and Schultz. And so just a great environment there. So fantastic play. Maybe just a couple others looking at too. I think Derek Carr makes a certainly interesting play too. Obviously like that Cincinnati game environment. And if you're looking to save some money, and this is more so on DraftKings, I would say, but, I think you could throw Tua in there for his price, maybe even Cam Newton, if you're looking to save money. But for me, I'm definitely overweight on Mahomes a ton. And then I have a little bit of exposure to Burrow too, but I've got a kind of a condensed pool for quarterbacks this week.
Yeah, Burrow looks like the guy who you can save a couple $100 on FanDuel. When I was playing with a couple of hand builds, I kept landing on Burrow. It just those extra couple $100 with the group of defenses I was looking at just seemed to fit. Interested to see Dak Prescott. We have him at 6.6% on FanDuel. Tuttle, I know you do the ownership report stuff. Are you surprised to see that number? And do you think that will hold true-ish by lock time on Prescott?
Yeah, I think we'll hold true. He's more expensive than Mahomes on FanDuel, which is kind of weird to say. I think the game's interesting in general because, or even the debate between Mahomes and Prescott is interesting because Prescott has just not shown the ceiling that Mahomes has even this season. And mostly because Dallas just likes to run the ball. They have more conservative play calling approach other than the first game of the year against Tampa Bay, which was kind of a funnel. I feel like Dallas will be able to do whatever they want offensively this game. So it'll be interesting to see which way they choose to attack Kansas City. I think Prescott is an excellent tournament option, but he'll need to run into volume on this one, which is kind of hard to predict. But I do like him as a tournament option because I do think the numbers we have on him versus Mahomes are true, especially on FanDuel. Like I think Mahomes is going to be double the ownership of Prescott. So that makes Prescott definitely the more intriguing tournament option. Albeit Mahomes then a pretty scary fade. But I will say on FanDuel specifically, well, I guess on both sides too, if you do have a read on the KC running back situation, kind of like I do, where I like Darrell Williams, playing Darrell Williams and like Tyreek Hill with Dak Prescott double stack, I think is an interesting way to approach that game that will be lower owned and a pretty decent way to differentiate. So I do like doing that. And that's what I have as my main tournament lineup currently on FanDuel is a Dak double stack with Darrell Williams and Tyreek. So I think that's an interesting way to differentiate. I think the biggest talking point right now on DraftKings is Tyler Huntley. Like I think people are playing him because he does rate really well from a point per dollar perspective. I think he's unnecessary. I think the floor is pretty frightening for both cash and tournaments. So I don't really feel like playing him. So if you have like 2v2s in the chat and they're going to ask Huntley, and I think like one of the calls on or one of the swaps on DraftKings is like Huntley and Goddard versus, Tua and somebody else at tight end. I'm going to go the Tua side on all those. So just a heads up on those ones. And another guy, I don't like Cam all that much for tournaments either. So I'm all about spending up at quarterback for tournaments on the slate in general. And I think that's mostly my term. Oh, I will give the Ryan Tannehill some love, even with that weather. I do think Tannehill is a decent play. And I do think the Titans will continue to have to throw the ball more. And I'm still waiting for the explosion spot where their passing game finally hits in all strides. But I think this is a decent spot for Tannehill.
Well, you make me feel a little bit better as a Titans fan, so I will take that. Just tying into that Chicago game, I know we don't typically talk defense a lot, but like I found myself landing on taking a shot at the Bears D with some unknown with Huntley at 3,500 on FanDuel. Don't have the DK price in front of me, but Chicago. I was initially looking at Seattle, just thinking about probable backup quarterback in Arizona there, but the whole game just shifted with the Lamar news, and I'm totally okay taking a crack at the Bears D with Tyler Huntley at the helm in retrospect there. Thus being said, we're going to go into running backs now. You mentioned that Kansas City Dallas game, and I'll pass it over to Kristi first, but we have Zeke projected at super low ownership too, and that is partially because there's just a lot of good plays today, quote unquote, rate plays, a lot of chalky spots. AJ Dillon priced fairly, but still might be a little underpriced for his role even. And of course, some of these guys we alluded to originally, Jeff Wilson, super cheap, going to be super popular, great matchup, has a higher rushing prop than Jonathan Taylor this week. A lot of things to talk about here, Kristi. So talk to me about some of these cheap popular pieces and which ones you're buying and if you're selling any of them.
Yep, absolutely. So I think a couple, especially for cash, that you probably want to get in your lineups. I think, Jeff Wilson, especially on FanDuel, his price is so cheap. I think he's a great cash game and tournament play and hard to get away from just because he is going to get all the touches with some of their missing running backs over there. So like him a ton. AJ Dillon, absolutely love him. We saw what he did last week, even with Jones in the lineup. And he's just such a great play, hard to get away from. So I think those are two really good cash game components, and I still like them in GPPs. Where I like to get a little bit different is I know Mark Ingram is up there for ownership. I was kind of hoping that we talked a little bit before show, Lamar Jackson, that news, if he was playing, I was still going to go David Montgomery. Thought he made a really good play today, especially he's the same price, I believe, on FanDuel as Ingram. So I think he's a fantastic pivot there, paired him with the Bears defense, like you mentioned, a good place to get a little bit different. Another play that you mentioned Zeke too, obviously, lower ownership on him. Nick Chubb is in a great spot. And I think people will look at his price and maybe get a little scared, but, obviously going against Detroit, Chubb and the Cleveland defense is a phenomenal play. Another guy I like a ton, I haven't seen a lot written about him, but Joe Mixon, he's been getting it done, comes into the week with a lot of touches. his price, he priced very favorably too. I've got Fanduel pulled up. He's 7,600, but I just think he's a really good play and have him in quite a few of my lineups today. So he's interesting. Myles Gaskin is another cheap guy. So I think, taking a look at him on both FanDuel and DraftKings, I definitely like him too. I think he's in the conversation. If there's a guy out of there that I'm looking probably to fade, it's Mark Ingram. Don't feel 100% confident that he's going to get all the touches, and they can do a few different things in their backfield too. So he's probably the guy that I'm looking to fade out of that group. And then, Tuttle talked about Darrell Williams. I've been the same way. I wrote him up too on expert survey. And then we got news that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is active. I've seen a couple of tweets. I don't know about you guys, but it sounds like Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be a little bit limited. So I'm kind of like you. I think great tournament option. I mean, his price is too good. He's been getting a lot of catches out of the backfield. And, if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is at all limited, Williams could have a huge day and could be one of the key components there. So I think he's fantastic. Trying to see if I'm missing anyone. Also got to throw Dalvin Cook and McCaffrey in there too. Those guys are going to get a little bit overlooked, and both can just, dominate the slate because there is so much cheap value. So definitely don't forget about those two. And it's great to pair Cook and Dillon in that same game environment too. So I think those are the main guys that I'm kind of looking at this week.
Yeah, lots of good stuff, and I love this. And I was laughing in chat. Someone had a question for you, Kristi, and he must watch the show. He's like, "What about Nick Chubb?" Kristi always throws a plug in for Nick Chubb, and he's in a fantastic spot. And that price is a little high, and people might get a little sticker shock there. And there's a little, I don't know, there's a weather situation there too. So even more than usual, they might be inclined to run the ball a little bit more. I like the Dalvin Cook call. Green Bay has actually been pretty bad against the run when teams have ran the ball against them. I actually wrote up Dalvin Cook on Scores and Odds about an hour ago, so I'm expecting a good day at a Dalvin Cook as well. Tuttle, talk to me about the running back position here. What are you looking at?
Yeah, in regards to Green Bay, I think people are mistaken that they think their defense is good, and it's more just their offense holds the ball for so long and really limits the plays the opposing offense can do, which limits totals in general. Again, it's a philosophy for Green Bay, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens again today, which would limit play total. But in general, if you think play volume somehow gets increased for Minnesota, I think all the Minnesota options are excellent tournament options. But I agree with Kristi with most of what she said. I think Wilson and Dillon are the chalk that you play, the good chalk that you eat. Mark Ingram is the chalk that you fade. I think going a little bit overlooked, Kristi mentioned they can do a little bit different things with their backfield. Tony Jones Jr. was activated off IR yesterday. People forget he was the RB2 to start the season. Like they liked him enough to prioritize him over Latavius Murray. So I wouldn't be all that surprised if we saw something closer to like a 65-35 split in the backfield, and we saw Tony Jones Jr. siphon on 5 to 10 touches away from Ingram, which certainly matters, even though he's cheap. The other thing I wanted to mention, what was it? Kristi mentioned Joe Mixon. I think he's a very good leverage play. Because I do think Burrow double stacks are going to be very popular, or even Burrow single stacks are going to be very popular in tournaments. I think that's a thing. I forgot what I was going to say, and it's now going to annoy me. I do think in cash on DraftKings, an interesting point. People will have the question on if you play 3 cheap RBs there. I think you play Dillon, Wilson, and McCaffrey as the third running back. I think that is how you approach cash games on DraftKings. And then I will say the latest news with CEH, because we've talked about it. The latest news is that he's going to warm up, and then the Kansas City will decide how they want to treat him after he warms up. They have a bye next week. There's really no reason to push him a lot. So he's one of those guys that I'm basically just forcing myself to play, more so because I know if I don't play Darrell Williams and he goes off, I'll just be extremely frustrated because of it.
Yeah. Sneaky spot for Williams, and the 425 kickoff makes it even more intriguing because we probably we won't know what the deal with CEH is, and even if he plays, we might not know until the second quarter how involved he's actually going to be. About 12:46 Eastern here, guys. Thanks for sticking with us. Let's move on to wide receiver. Of course, there's a lot of big names in that same 4 o'clock game. Looks like Devontae Adams is going to command a lot of ownership, and rightfully so, as he typically does. Tyreek, AJ Brown, despite the weather, a lot of volume there. CeeDee Lamb, everyone's talking about Gallup. Where's CeeDee Lamb going to fall on the cards? Jamar Chase in that Bengals game, great spot coming off a bye week. I expect Cincinnati to be well prepared for this one too. So Kristi, talk to me about wide receiver today.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think, there's going to be a lot of people trying to get the guys at the top. So Devontae Adams and Tyreek, which are fantastic plays. They're going to commend a lot of ownership. And I think, in cash game plays too. I think Gallup is going to be a guy that, because of his price, and once we got word that Cooper was out, think he makes a lot of sense for cash game plays. So he's someone that I think is a good cash core to build around. That being said, yeah, Adams, Tyreek, Jamar Chase. So we talked about Burrow. I mean, Jamar Chase is right up there with Adams and Tyreek and a lot of those superstars there. If he can break free, I mean, he's kind of like Tyreek, just down the field and could easily have a couple touchdowns. So I think he makes a fantastic tournament play. Deebo Samuel, I mean, he's been getting it done too. They've even, given him some rushing attempts. So we've seen him score a lot of different ways. So he's great. AJ Brown hasn't done much the last couple of weeks. His price has come down. So I certainly think that he's in the conversation and someone to take a look at. I think, again, saving some money, T Higgins, I think he's a fine play too, kind of in that mid-tier range. And then I like Hunter Renfrow a lot too. He's been seeing a ton more looks. Both he and Waller should have a great game too, and good run backs opposite of some of the Cincinnati exposure. I'd also maybe throw in there, Metcalf and Lockett from that Seattle game. They're going to definitely go overlooked, but, we know the upside that Metcalf has, and think he makes a great play. So we talked a little bit about CeeDee Lamb too, and it's kind of a little bit of a sticker shock when you look at his price. Not sure what he is actually on DraftKings, but I know he's $8K on FanDuel. He's right up there with Adams and Tyreek. And so I think he makes an excellent pivot. We've seen what he can do too. And with Gallup commanding so much ownership, he makes a great play. Also throw in Jalen Waddle, kind of in that mid-tier range too, for Miami, especially if you're looking to play Tua and saving some money maybe on DraftKings. I think he's a fine play too. But that's mostly the guys I'm looking at. I certainly have a lot of exposure to Tyreek. He's probably my most owned receiver on the week for sure.
Okay, Tuttle, over to you.
Yeah, not a whole lot to add in terms of players I like. I'll discuss something I'm trying to talk myself into to justify Devontae Adams' fade. Obviously, a guy that's extremely scary to fade. But I do think this Aaron Rodgers foot injury or toe injury is potentially a little bit bigger than what people are thinking or treating the situation, at least. So, if there's any sort of doubt that Rodgers is going to be limited, or if he can't go a full game, we're back to Jordan Love trying to throw Devontae Adams the ball, which is not very fun. So I've used that as a reason to justify not playing Devontae Adams on some teams, just because I do think it could be a potentially worse situation than what we're seeing or hearing otherwise. In terms of tournament options, CeeDee Lamb, I think, is my favorite tournament option. I liked him before the news that Amari Cooper was out. I like him just as much now. I still don't think he's going to get a ton of ownership just because of the price tag is expensive. He's up there by Devontae Adams in pricing. People are going to opt to play Michael Gallup because he's significantly cheaper. I think Gallup's an excellent play in all formats, but CeeDee Lamb I love just because of the projected ownership. We have him at 13%, which I would be kind of surprised if he got that high on DraftKings. And we have him about 16% Fanduel, which again, I would be kind of surprised if he got that high. So I think those are good play, or CeeDee Lamb's a really good tournament option. Low end, if you're looking to get kind of crazy exposure to that Kansas City Dallas game, I do think Byron Pringle's worth mentioning on DraftKings. He's 3,400. They've been very difficult to project in terms of their secondary wide receiver rotation. Like Tyreek Hill's obviously the man. And then after him, they've kind of spread looks around. They've spread playing time around. Byron Pringle played as wide receiver 2 last week, and he was kind of trending that direction the weeks prior to, while Mecole Hardman has been kind of trending out. So I do think Pringle is worth taking some shots on, but that's mostly a tournament option on DraftKings only, just because of the pricing dynamics there.
Yeah, good stuff. A lot of good points as well. For time purposes, about 12:51. Let's move on to tight end, and then we'll take some questions here. Of course, Kelsey is a premier option every week. Darren Waller, fair price, carrying a lot of ownership on FanDuel as well. And then you have a lot of single-digit ownership guys for the most part. Actually, looks like Zach Ertz is carrying some more ownership now than he was before. And we have Mark Andrews at 10% too, but I like him a lot less with Huntley behind the wheel for sure. Interested in Dan Arnold, interested in Gesicki. Dalton Schultz, I'm really interested in this Dallas game. We have him at 2% on FanDuel. He might be one of my favorite plays of the slate in general. I think Kansas City can get exploited by tight ends. We'll see what happens there. Anyway, I'll throw it over to you, Kristi. What are you looking at here at tight end?
Yeah, you made some really great points. I think, Waller and Kelsey at the top. Absolutely. I mean, Kelsey finally, I think a lot of people were ready to write him off, and, he had a great game last week. So definitely like spending up for him. Like you said, Ertz is really moving up there for ownership as well, if you needed to save some money. Like George Kittle quite a bit. He's got a lot of upside. His price is a little bit lower than what we're used to seeing. So I certainly like Kittle. For cheap, I think Dan Arnold, he's been getting it done, and he's, kind of priced in that mid-tier range right now. So I certainly think he makes a fine option. You mentioned Dalton Schultz, and I think you're exactly right. I mean, Kansas City definitely doesn't defend the tight end very well. So I think Schultz, and then having Cooper out of the game, Schultz should get a few more targets. So I just think he makes a ton of sense there. Colt Mccoy, I like it probably a little bit better over on DraftKings, but, Allen Robinson's out, and Komet's been getting more targets, and I just think he could be a sneaky play over there. And even on FanDuel too, if you need it, I think he's 5,100 over there. Could be a fine play. Dallas Goedert too. He's kind of in that mid-tier range, going up against New Orleans, not carrying too much ownership. I liked Mark Andrews before the news came out, so I'm kind of off of him. We've got him at about 10% ownership, but he's not someone I'm really considering this week. Trying to see if I'm missing anyone else. Yeah, I'm mostly looking to spend up here, kind of in that Kelsey Waller area. But if I'm looking to save, I find myself kind of in that Arnold, Komet range and Schultz range as well.
Okay, Tuttle, anything to add at tight end?
Yeah, I'll throw a couple crappy plays out there. Adam Troutman is actually seeing volume with Simeon under center. It's a good on paper match at Philadelphia struggles to defend the tight end. So I think Troutman is an interesting play. John Bates on DraftKings is only 2,500. We've kind of seen that tight end role just produce no matter who is there for Washington. So I think John Bates is playable. And then got to give Ferk Daddy some love. Anthony Ferkser, Jeff Swaim's out this week. Swaim and Ferkser have been running fairly similar number of routes, but Swaim has been the more heavily targeted. There's nowhere to throw this ball in this Titans offense other than AJ Brown, basically. So Ferkser is another guy I think is worth taking some shots on at 2,500.
Wait up. You were the Marcus Johnson, the biggest advocate, probably the only advocate in the industry. So hold on.
I know exactly. You nailed that call.
Second of all, no Marcus Johnson love.
I think he's fine. He's fine. It's just Ferkser's the guy I'm touting for the Titans this week. I like on DraftKings. I like the Tannehill, AJ Brown, Ferkser stacks.
Love it. I love it. Love the Titans talk here. Good stuff, guys. All right, let's go to the chat here. 12:55 Eastern. Let's power through these. Kristi, we'll start with you. DK Cash, Montgomery or Ingram?
I'm going Montgomery.
Okay. FanDuel Cash, Mahomes or Allen, Tuttle?
Mahomes.
Okay. Kristi, FanDuel Cash, Connor, Ingram or Montgomery?
One of those?
Yes.
I'm going to Montgomery.
Okay. Any love for Bryan Edwards, Tuttle, as a contrarian bring back?
I don't have any Bryan Edwards. If you're using him, use him as a bring back. Like, it's fine, whatever. But I don't have any.
All right. FanDuel GPP, Kristi, Nick Chubb or Jonathan Taylor?
They're both great plays, and we really didn't talk about Jonathan Taylor. I think I'm still going Chubb, but they're both fantastic plays.
My guy Don Yeezy asking about Deontay Foreman, and I think he makes for an interesting play. No Jeremy McNichols this week either, who was taking about 30+% of the snaps there. And I think Foreman is just a better runner than AP right now. I think Foreman will get the third down work over Peterson for sure. So I don't hate the Foreman call there. Tuttle, I think I'm over on you now. Let's see. I don't know what that question is. Sorry, I got to move on. DK Cash, Montgomery Arnold or Ingram Schultz?
I like Schultz so much that I'm going to say the second, even though I think Ingram's a good fade this week.
Okay. Whether scare you off from AJ Brown at all, Kristi?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I like him because he's come down in price, but yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit.
Okay. DK Cash, Tuttle, Montgomery, Ingram. I think we had that before, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, Kristi answered Montgomery. I'll go Montgomery too.
Okay. How low will you pay for wide receiver today, guys? Are we talking Gallup like range here rationally? Like is he the punt? Like he's the salary saver, right? Like no question
for
about
cash. Yeah, you can go cheaper in tournaments like Pringle or something in tournaments, but Gallup I think is the cheapest for cash.
All right. Cool. Yeah, and that answers the next question about Pringle. We did mention Pringle. 12:58 Eastern, guys. Start locking up those lineups. DK Cash, Kristi, McCaffrey and Tua, or Prescott and Connor for cash?
I'd probably go Prescott and Connor.
Okay. Gaskin, Tuttle, Gaskin and Higgins, or Ingram and Gallup?
See, this is another one where I like the second piece so much that I have to side with Ingram, even though I think he's a good fade.
Okay. DK tournament, Kristi, Tyler Lockett or DJ Moore?
I'd go Lockett.
Tuttle, is it nuts to expect Jay Crowder to exploit the matchup as Flacco's security blanket?
It's not nuts. No, it's fine for tournaments.
Okay. If you were to stack an early game, what's your favorite one? Do either of you have a quick answer in an early game today? And while we're doing that, Tuttle, how about Bates at tight end? We talked about Washington. You like him?
Yeah, Bates is fine. Better DraftKings play for sure.
Okay. FanDuel Cash, Devontae, Tyreek, and Debo. How do you rank them? Either one of you guys. Devontae, Tyreek, and Debo.
There's very little distance between the first two, and then a decent gap between Devontae Hill and then Debo. So Debo's clearly third. I slightly prefer Tyreek this week.
Yep. I do too.
But yeah, I don't think that's I don't think that's the common answer, but yes, I slightly prefer Tyreek this week.
Yep.
Okay, 12:59, guys. We have a Jamar Chase and Diggs question. It's 1:00 now. Try to get through all these. That's very close for me between Chase and Diggs. Like the volume and I like the matchups. Low price receiver. We talked about Gallup. Tuttle mentioned Pringlin for large field tournaments. And yeah, a Boyd instead of Higgins question. And it is a little interesting with Boyd, just not as involved as I thought. Maybe he'd get a little more volume that T. Higgins was getting at the beginning of the year, and it just hasn't been working out that way. But it'll be interesting to see how the Bengals look coming out of the bye week against the Raiders, who just got throttled against Mahomes. Let me get a score prediction quick. I'll bring Devin on as well. Kristi, Tuttle, Devin. This Kansas City-Dallas game, I'm sure, is going to be a highly rated, televised contest today. So, Kristi, who wins the game today? And give me a score prediction.
I think Kansas City does win the game today, but I think it's a high-scoring affair. Score prediction. I think it's.
They'll score more if Darrell Williams plays, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think Kansas City wins by a touchdown.
Cool. Tuttle, you got a prediction here?
Over the total, so 35-31 Kansas City.
Wow, nice. Devin, what do you got for me here, buddy? Bring you in.
I'm going to say just under the total. So maybe like a 21-16, something like that. Dallas wins.
Okay. That would kill a bunch of lineups, but would be really cool. So let's get to it. Thanks, everyone, for joining with us. Keith and I will be back for NBA Crunch Time and the NFL Showdown show tonight. So we'll be busy today. So for Kristi and Dan and Devin, I'm Justin. Good luck, everybody.